For what purpose does the gentleman from Virginia seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, pursuant to House Resolution 421, I call up H.R. 3504 and ask for its immediate consideration.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 3504, a bill to amend Title 18 United States Code to prohibit a health care practitioner from failing to exercise the proper degree of care in the case of a child who survives an abortion or attempted abortion.
Pursuant to House Resolution 421, the bill is considered read. The bill shall be debatable for 1 hour, equally divided and controlled by the chair and ranking member of the Committee on the Judiciary or their respective designees. The gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Goodlatte, and the gentlewoman from California, Ms. Hsu, each will control 30 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Goodlatte.
Madam Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days within which to revise and extend their remarks and include extraneous materials on H.R. 3504 currently under consideration. Madam Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Millions of people have viewed videos of representatives of the organization Planned Parenthood, which performs some 40% of all abortions each year. Those videos, recorded undercover, include discussions of instances in which, during the course of an attempted abortion, a baby is born, quote, intact, end quote. As one doctor caught on tape said, sometimes, if someone delivers before we get to see them for a procedure, then the babies, are intact. But that's not what we go for, end quote. Another business executive said, if you had intact cases, which we've done a lot, we sometimes ship those back to our lab in its entirety, end quote. A procurement manager says on a video, quote, I literally have had women come in and they'll go in the OR, the operating room, and they're back out in 3 minutes. And I'm going, what's going on? Oh yeah, the fetus was already in the vaginal canal whenever we put her in the stirrups. It just fell out, end quote. And a former employee of the same company told investigators that she was shown the results of one abortion by a doctor, as she recalls, this is the most gestated fetus and the closest thing to a baby I've seen. And she, the doctor, taps the heart and it starts beating. The nodes are still firing, and I don't know if that means it's technically dead or it's alive. It had a face. It wasn't completely torn up. Its nose was very pronounced. It had eyelids. Since the fetus was so intact, she said, quote, well, okay, this is a really good fetus, and it looks like we can procure a lot from it. We're going to procure a brain. That means we're going to have to cut the head open. She takes a scissors and she makes a small incision right here at the chin and goes, I would say, maybe a little bit through the mouth. And she's like, okay, can you go the rest of the way? And so she gave me the scissors and told me that I have to cut down the middle of the face. And I can't even describe what that feels like, end quote. The House Judiciary Committee, which I chair, is undergoing a comprehensive investigation of the issues raised by these videos. But as that and other investigations continue, Congress must move immediately to protect any children born alive during the course of a failed abortion. The bill before us today is simple, yet profound, insofar as it might be a reflection of the nation's conscience. Its operative provisions provide that in the case of an abortion that results in a child born alive, any healthcare practitioner present must exercise the same degree of professional care to preserve the life of the child as he or she would render to any other child born alive at the same gestational age. The bill also provides that the child must be immediately transported and admitted to a hospital. If a baby born alive is left to die, the penalty can be up to 5 years in jail. If the child is cut open for its body parts or some other overt act is taken, the punishment is that for first-degree murder, which can include life in prison or the death penalty. Babies are born alive during failed abortions. The committee just last week heard direct testimony by 2 grown women who, as babies, survived attempted abortions. The mother of one of them, Gianna Jessen, was advised by Planned Parenthood to have an abortion. But as Ms. Jessen testified, instead of dying After 18 hours of being burned in my mother's womb, I was delivered alive in an abortion clinic in Los Angeles. Her medical records state clearly that she was born alive during an abortion. She continued, quote, "Thankfully, the abortionist was not at work yet. Had he been there, he would have ended my life with strangulation, suffocation, or leaving me there to die. Instead, a nurse called an ambulance and I was rushed to a hospital. Doctors did not expect me to live. I did. I was later diagnosed with cerebral palsy, which was caused by a lack of oxygen to my brain while surviving the abortion. I was never supposed to hold my head up or walk. I do. And cerebral palsy is a great gift to me." Just think of that for a moment. Ms. Jessen says cerebral palsy is a gift to her because it came with the gift of life. Ms. Jessen presented a picture at the hearing showing the results of the sort of abortion she survived. Today I ask the nation to see in its collective mind the body of a baby, much like this one, on the floor, born alive during a failed abortion. I ask that we collectively reach down into our hearts and also reach down to the floor. And as we vote today, I ask that we as a nation grasp the value of life and also grasp the baby's back, lift its tiny body off the ground, and bring it to a hospital and not leave her with the abortionist. I yield back.
The gentleman reserves his time. The gentlelady from California is recognized.
Madam Speaker, contrary to its misleading title, this bill is not about protecting children born alive. Its real intent is to further undermine a woman's right to choose, a right that has been constitutionally guaranteed for more than 42 years by Roe v. Wade. Not only does this bill attempt to politicize women's health and limit women's access to abortion, it would interfere with the sacred doctor-patient relationship and substitute a physician's best judgment with the judgment of a handful of politicians. We must not forget that this bill has come to the floor at the same time as the push to defund Planned Parenthood. This attack on a venerable and respected provider of high-quality health care would have a devastating impact on women, especially women in rural communities, low-income women, and women of color, and would deny women access to preventive care, life-saving cancer screenings, and family planning services. Approximately 1 woman in 5 has relied on Planned Parenthood for health care at some point in her lifetime. It is a blatant attack on women and families to defund an organization that uses federal funds to prevent abortions and to help families stay healthy and cannot even use federal funding for abortion. It would be the saddest of ironies that by defunding Planned Parenthood's critical contraception and other reproductive health services in the name of opposing abortion, we would see more unintended pregnancies and therefore more abortions. Among its flaws, H.R. 3504 proposes a standard of care for abortion providers that could interfere with the ability of physicians to make medical decisions for their patients. In doing so, the bill represents an unprecedented level of intrusion by the government into medical decisions. For instance, the bill requires an abortion provider to immediately transport a fetus to a hospital in some cases, even if the fetus is not viable under existing law and under the standards of care applicable to neonatal physicians. This requirement is so broad and the penalty so severe, up to 5 years in prison, that one can only conclude that the real purpose of the bill is to intimidate abortion providers out of service. The bill also requires doctors and employees of hospitals and clinics that provide abortion services to report any violations of the bill's standard of care to state or federal law enforcement authorities. Any person that fails to comply with these requirements is threatened with fines and up to 5 years in prison. This is not just the doctors, but the cleaning crew and the receptionists. On top of this, the language in this bill completely fails to distinguish between a viable and non-viable fetus, which is the constitutional line that separates abortions that may be performed without restrictions from those that may be regulated or prohibited. The bill's vague and broad mandates, combined with severe penalties, will effectively intimidate doctors and ultimately drive them away from the abortion practice, which appears to be the true intent of this troubling bill. This is why so many organizations are opposed to this bill. Those like the National Women's Law Center, AAUW, ACLU, and Physicians for Reproductive Choice. In fact, the American Congress of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, which represents 58,000 physicians, opposes H.R. 3504 because it represents gross interference in the practice of medicine, inserting a politician in between a woman and her doctor. By intimidating doctors and thereby making abortion unavailable in a practical matter, abortion opponents seek to accomplish, in fact, what they have not accomplished in the courts or in public opinion. Simply put, H.R. 3504 is yet another attack on women's health and rights. When the Born Alive Infant Protection Act, or BIPA, became law 13 years ago, the bill's sponsors clarified that the law was not intended to affect abortion practice or a woman's right to choose. We did not want to constrain or chill medical decisions regarding patient care. That's why Judiciary Committee Democrats voted to support it. The bill before us today appears to directly contradict those assurances. Let's not forget, politicians are not doctors. We should be concerned about doing our jobs and fully funding high-quality women's health care instead of trying to keep doctors from doing theirs. I strongly urge my colleagues to oppose this dangerous bill.
Reserves. The gentleman from Virginia is recognized.
Madam Speaker, at this time, it's my pleasure to yield 5 minutes to the chairman of the Constitution and Civil Justice Subcommittee of the Judiciary Committee, the gentleman from Arizona, Mr. Franks.
The gentleman is recognized for 5
minutes. And the author
minutes.
of this legislation.
And I thank the gentleman, and I also thank the gentleman for his commitment to protecting these little babies. Madam Speaker, the United States of America is an exceptional nation whose unique core premise is that declared conviction that we are all created equal and that each of us is endowed by our Creator with the unalienable right to live. Abraham Lincoln called upon all of us in this chamber to remember those words of America's founding fathers and, quote, their enlightened belief that nothing stamped with the divine image and likeness was sent into the world to be trodden on or degraded and imbruted by its fellows. He reminded those he called posterity that, quote, when in the distant future some man, some factions, some interests should set up a doctrine that some were not entitled to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that their posterity, that's us, Madam Speaker, that their posterity might look up again to the Declaration of Independence and take courage to renew the battle which their fathers began, unquote. Madam Speaker, the sincerest purpose of the Born Alive Protection Survivors Protection Act is to renew that noble battle to respect and protect those little fellow human beings among us who are this moment being trodden on and degraded and imbruted by their fellows. Not long ago, in the land of the free and the home of the brave, authorities entered the clinic of Dr. Kermit Gosnell and found a torture chamber for little born-alive babies that defies description within the constraints of the English language. The grand jury report at that time said, quote, Dr. Kermit Gosnell had a simple solution for unwanted babies. He killed them. He didn't call it that. He called it ensuring fetal demise. The way he ensured fetal demise was by sticking scissors in the back of the baby's neck and cutting the spinal cord. He called it snipping. Over the years, there were hundreds of snippings. Ashley Baldwin, one of Dr. Gosnell's employees, said she saw babies breathing, and she described one as 2 feet long that no longer had eyes or mouth, but in her words was making like this screeching noise, and it, quote, sounded like a little alien. And now in recent days, Madam Speaker, numerous video recordings have been released that demonstrate that Kermit Gosnell was just the tip of the iceberg of the abortion industry's unspeakable cruelty to these little children of God. The veil has now been pulled back, and all of us now see the walls behind the abortion industry and the horrifying plight of its little human victims, who we must not forget are the least of these, our little brothers and sisters. Our response as a people and a nation to these horrors shown in these videos is vital to everything those lying out in Arlington National Cemetery died to save. The Born Alive Abortion Survivors Protection Act, Madam Speaker, protects little children who have been born alive. No one in this body can obscure the humanity and the personhood of these little born alive babies, nor can they take refuge within the schizophrenic paradox Roe versus Wade has subjected this country to for now more than 40 years. The abortion industry has labored all these decades to convince the world that unborn children and born children should be completely separated in our minds, that while born children are persons worthy of protection, unborn children are not persons and are not worthy of protection. But, Madam Speaker, those who oppose this bill to protect born alive babies now have the impossible task of trying to join born children and unborn children back together again, and then trying to convince all of us to condemn them both as inhuman and not worthy of protection after all. To anyone who has not invincibly hardened their heart and soul, Madam Speaker, an honest consideration of this absurd inconsistency is profoundly enlightening. Because you see, this country has faced such paradox and self-imposed blindness before. There was a time that our own House rules banned any discussion or debate in this chamber about the effort to end human slavery in America. But, Madam Speaker, that debate did come, and with it came a time when the humanity of the victims and the inhumanity of what was being done to them became so glaring, even to the hardest of hearts, that it moved an entire nation of people to find the compassion and the courage in their own souls to change their position. And now to this generation, Madam Speaker, that time has come again.
Gentleman's time has expired. The gentleman from Virginia reserves. The gentlewoman from California is recognized.
I would like to yield 3 minutes to our outstanding and leading member of our Judiciary Committee, the gentleman from New York, Representative Nadler.
The gentleman from New York is recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. God bless the United States Supreme Court for its Roe versus Wade decision that liberated the women of this country to make their own decisions, to exercise their own consciences on the most intensely private matter of whether they should carry a pregnancy to term. Now, I recognize, of course, that there are those who hold the religious conviction that a one-celled organism, 1 cell, 2 cells, is a fully formed human being. They are entitled to that religious conviction. They are not entitled to impose that religious conviction on all the women of this country who may not share it. And that's essentially the abortion debate. But we're not debating abortion today, although some people would like to. We're debating this ridiculous Born Alive Abortion Survivors Protection Act. 15 years ago, I stood on this floor and supported the Born Alive Infant Protection Act. I said it was unnecessary. It simply repeated existing law. It has always been the law that if an infant is born, whether that birth was intentional or not is irrelevant. That is a person. If you kill that infant, you're guilty of murder or manslaughter, as the case may be. You certainly may not do so intentionally. The Born Alive Infant Protection Act did not change that. Just added superfluous language to the law. Its only purpose was to try to paint people who support the right to choose as supporters of infanticide. So we said, no, it's silly because it doesn't add anything to the law. It simply duplicates the existing law, but we'll support it, so we cannot be slandered that way. Now we have this bill. which does essentially two things. One, it repeats in different language exactly the same provisions from 15 years ago. Doesn't change the law that we enacted 15 years ago. Doesn't change the law that pre-existed in every state of the union. If you kill a child, it's murder, period. Dr. Gosnell, I would point out, is in jail for life because he committed multiple murders. Nobody supports what he does, and nobody, except in some of their fantasies that Mr. Franks has, thinks that Planned Parenthood or anybody else supports such actions. This bill, however, cannot be supported because it does one harmful thing. This bill says that the born alive child must be given the same standard of care whether he's born alive in an attempted abortion or from a regular birth. That's already the law. Of course that's law. It ought to be the law. It must be the law. It always has been the law. But what it also does is it says that as soon as the doctor has given that child the proper standard of care, he must rush it to the hospital, regardless of whether that might be good or bad for the child, regardless of the standard of care, regardless of whether the nearby hospital has a neonatal intensive. Can I have 30 seconds more?
Nice.
I yield 1 minute more
For one
to
additional
Representative
minute.
Nadler.
Thank you. Regardless of whether the nearby hospitals have neonatal intensive care units. Of course, the doctor under existing law, everybody associated with the doctor under existing law, has the duty of giving the best possible medical care under any circumstances. And that may be to transport the baby to the hospital. It may be that the baby is too frail to transport. But along comes this bill and says, we don't care about the real situation that doctor faces with that infant. We know how to practice medicine in every situation, we in Congress. So we're going to say it must be brought to the hospital, even if that might kill the child. It's just stupid. And that's why this bill must be opposed. Not because it changes the standard of law or has anything to do with born alive infants, but because it mandates that a child be brought to the hospital when medical care might indicate that that child in that situation should not be brought to the hospital. It may kill children. That's why we must oppose this bill. I yield back.
The gentlelady from California reserves. The gentleman from Virginia is recognized.
Madam Speaker, at this time I yield 1 minute to the gentleman from Louisiana, Mr. Fleming.
The gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As a physician, a father and a grandfather, let me first respond and say that in the process of a birth, abortion, there's no way one can tell whether that child is viable until you actually apply health-saving tools and techniques to that baby. So that argument that viability and all of that made in advance really makes no sense whatsoever. Look, committing abortions is not health care for women. The baby dies a horrifically painful and ghastly death. Her tiny hands and feet, brain, and spinal tissues are dissected and sold to the highest bidder, and her mother is agonizing over the loss of a child. But what happens if a child survives this barbaric and inhumane murder attempt? Abortionists have been known to snip babies' spines, throw children into plastic bags, or simply leave the infant to die away from a human touch and healing care. Today's bill, however, will put a stop to the double murder attempt on a baby's life. It will protect children, infants, and who are born alive, affording these tiny patients immediate medical attention. I yield back. Thank you.
Gentleman's time has expired. The gentleman from Virginia reserves. The gentlelady from California is recognized.
I would like to yield 2 minutes to the gentlewoman from New York, Ms. Maloney.
The gentlelady is recognized for 2 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, I stand in strong opposition to this punitive and intrusive bill. I am both disturbed, offended, that this latest attempt to restrict women's access to reproductive health care is based on a series of videos that have been found to be grotesquely deceptive and purposefully misleading. This is politics at its most manipulative, and politics that should never be permitted to come between a patient and her doctor. I will not. This bill attempts to criminalize legal medical care and punish millions of women by rolling back reproductive choices. It wages a kind of guerrilla warfare against Roe v. Wade by threatening doctors with jail time for providing care to their patients. The American Colleges and Congress of Obstetricians and Gynecologists called the vague requirements, drastic penalties, unnecessary requirements like going to the hospital, scare tactics that are unnecessary and wrong. This bill would have the federal government threaten doctors who do their job taking care of their patients with up to 5 years imprisonment. To make it all even more outrageous, this bill is based on a series of unsupported allegations and ignores the fact that there has been no evidence of wrongdoing by Planned Parenthood. In fact, 5 states have now conducted their own investigations into the charges against Planned Parenthood and have found that no laws have been broken. Instead, the backers of this bill rely on misleading, badly doctored videos released by an extreme anti-choice group as the basis for a slew of legislation to decrease access to care for women in this country who can least afford it. Millions of women rely on Planned Parenthood for their basic health care.
We would like to give an additional 30 seconds.
The gentlelady from New York is recognized for an additional 30 seconds.
There is no choice in this country which has been guaranteed by our Supreme Court without access to choice. This bill attempts to stop the access to choice by putting doctors in jail by absurd requirements. I urge my colleagues to respect the relationship between women and their doctors, respect their need for affordable and available health care, and vote no on this punitive and intrusive bill. I yield back.
The gentlelady's time has expired. The gentlelady from California reserves, and the gentleman from Virginia is recognized.
Madam Speaker, at this time, I am pleased to yield 1 minute to the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Roscoe.
The gentleman from Illinois is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you, Chairman. My heart is heavy with this debate. My heart becomes very heavy when I hear the descriptions of this awful procedure. And my heart becomes even heavier, Madam Speaker, when I listen to the twisted logic and the distortions of people who find themselves implicitly defending this. The administration has said that they will, President Obama has said that he will veto this because it's related to abortion services. And yet, Mr. Nadler moments ago said this has nothing to do with abortion, that everybody agrees that these babies are born and deserve the protections of the law. And he says basically it's a sideshow. It's either one or the other, Madam Speaker, and they don't get to argue it both ways. But I think we ought to be able to agree on this, that we're talking about people who are born, who are breathing, whose hearts are pumping, whose fingers are twitching, who have full feeling and deserve every benefit of the doubt and every protection of the law. I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Virginia reserves, and the gentlelady from California is recognized.
I would like to yield 2 minutes to a leading physician in our Congress, and that is the Congress member from California, Mr. Ruiz.
The gentleman from California is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. As an emergency physician, I am deeply disturbed by the provisions in this legislation. The Born Alive Infants Protection Act was signed into law in 2002. The pro-choice community did not oppose it, and it passed the House by a voice vote under suspension of the rules. It was consistent with the already high medical and ethical standards within the physician community. This new bill, however, is unnecessary and dangerous. It criminalizes physicians who make serious and compassionate decisions based on their deep desire to do what's best for the mother, her health, and life. It creates a police state and forces healthcare staffs that do not have medical training to inform law enforcement of their non-medical questioning of a physician's sound judgment under the threat of prosecution and imprisonment. This also gives anti-choice lawyers the ability to bully, threaten, and harm a physician's reputation and practice. Infanticide is already illegal in this country. This bill is highly intrusive to the patient-doctor relationship. Let's be clear. This is yet another attempt by anti-choice bully politicians to restrict a woman's right to choose and doctors' ability to provide sound, compassionate, and safe care for women. It is an aggressive, bullish scare tactic that puts the relationship of a woman and her physician in jeopardy and forces politicians in the middle of decisions that they have no business being involved in. I agree with the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists and other physician groups in opposing this legislation, and I stand with the women across this great country that have continued to fight for decades to defend their legal right to choose.
Gentleman's time has expired. The gentlewoman from California reserves, and the gentleman from Virginia is recognized.
Madam Speaker, at this time, it's my pleasure to yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from New Jersey, Mr. Smith, a champion of this cause.
The gentleman from New Jersey is recognized for 2 minutes.
I thank the distinguished chairman. Madam Speaker, undercover videos by the Center for Medical Progress have again brought into sharp focus that some babies actually survive abortion. Dr. Gindi, medical director of Planned Parenthood Rocky Mountain, says sometimes we get if somebody delivers before we see them for a procedure that they are intact. That is, Madam Speaker, born alive, breathing, crying, gasping for air. One fetal tissue broker describes on the video watching a fetus that just fell out and left to die. We have a duty to protect these vulnerable children from violence, exploitation, and death. Humanitarian due diligence requires that born alive babies be taken to a hospital to obtain care and enhance prospects of survival. Abortion clinics, to the contrary, do not have neonatal intensive care units. They are not equipped to protect those children. They're in the business of killing those children. The grand jury in the abortionist Kermit Gosnell case said, quote, Gosnell had a simple solution for unwanted babies. He killed them. He euphemistically called snipping the born-alive baby's spinal cord ensuring fetal demise. Last week, Gianna Jessen, as Bob Goodlatte noted earlier, an abortion survivor told the Judiciary Committee he had survived a Planned Parenthood late-term multi-hour abortion because, quote, the abortionist had not yet come to work. Had he been there, he would have ended my life with strangulation, suffocation, or leaving me there to die. The Born Alive Survivors Protection Act, authored by pro-life champion Trent Franks, simply says any child who survives an abortion must be given the same care as any other premature baby born at the same gestational age. This legislation builds on the landmark Born Alive Infant Protection Act of '02, authored by Steve Shabbat, by adding important enforcement provisions. Tragically, President Obama, the abortion president, has vowed to veto this pro-child human rights legislation, a position that is extreme, anti-child, inhumane, and indefensible. Yield back.
Gentleman's time has expired. The gentleman from Virginia reserves, and the gentlewoman from California is recognized.
And now I would like to yield 3 minutes to the ranking member of our Constitutional Subcommittee, the gentleman from Tennessee, Representative Cohen.
The gentleman from Tennessee is recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I thank you for the time. These are very important bills, this bill and the next bill, to the women of this nation and to the people in America, because these are rights that are being under attack. I mean, there is this Born Alive bill which came to the floor through Rules Committee, and the next bill which stops funding to Planned Parenthood, but they're all part of the same thing. They're the same bill. They're the same message. Because what we're doing here in this Congress is messaging. And the message is the Republican Party wants to defeat Roe v. Wade. They think that that was a bad bill and that it's wrong to have legalized in America for women to have choice. Most of the Democrats don't think that. Neither of these bills went through the committee process, which is really abhorrent. In fact, yesterday we passed a bill about new and novel ideas and saying that you get sanctioned. You'd be sanctioned if, as a lawyer, if you brought some case that was frivolous and didn't really come through the proper procedures. Well, if we had that kind of rule in Congress, these bills wouldn't be allowed to be on the floor because they're supposed to go through committee where the public has notice, the public has an opportunity to have a witness. The majority side has 3 witnesses, the minority side has 1 witness. There's a discussion, there are questions, there are answers, there are statements, there's thought, there's input, there's due process, there's petitioning grievances. All of this has been abrogated. No due process, no regular order. These come straight to the floor because these are messaging bills for the American public. The Republican Party and parts of the Republican Party often say, we want our country back. What they want back is a country that is pre-1971, before Roe v. Wade. What they want is a country that is pre-Brown versus Board of Education. What they want is a country that is pre the Voting Rights Act, which has been limited by the Supreme Court and which has not been renewed by this Congress, nor has it gotten a vote. What they want is a country that's free of many of the immigrants who've come to this country and made it great, particularly from South America, the Caribbean, and that country's not going to come back. In my state of Tennessee, the Republicans have filed a bill to declare the Supreme Court decision on same-sex marriage as illegal in Tennessee. Nullification dripping from their lips, as George Wallace would say in the courthouse door. It's the same thing today. Take our country back. No Hispanics, no women's choice, no civil rights, no voting rights. Dwight D. Eisenhower's 1950 America, and Dwight D. Eisenhower wasn't at fault. He tried to bring us forward. These bills are part of that same attack on the progress that we've made in America. They have not gone through the proper process, and they are attempts to change America in a way that would affect American women adversely. This bill has a definition of abortion that's new, shouldn't be done. I'd oppose both bills and the rules and thank the Speaker for her time.
The gentlelady from California reserves. The gentleman from Virginia is recognized.
Madam Speaker, at this time, it's my pleasure to yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Ohio, Mr. Shabbat, a member of the Judiciary Committee.
The gentleman from Ohio is recognized for 2 minutes.
I thank the gentleman for yielding. A few years ago, a so-called doctor in Philadelphia by the name of Kermit Gosnell was killing babies, literally. He ran an abortion clinic there, and as can happen in these houses of horror, some of these innocent unborn children were actually born alive before they could be exterminated in the womb. So there you have a little now-born baby squirming, kicking, sometimes crying, right there in front of you on the table. So what did Gosnell do? He'd take a pair of scissors, plunge them into the baby, and sever his or her spinal cord. No care whatsoever about the pain involved. One of Gosnell's employees who witnessed this barbarism described the baby's scream as follows. I can't describe it. It sounded like a little alien. Well, this wasn't an alien. It was a human being, just like you and me, although in an earlier form of development. Well, Gosnell, thank God, is in prison. But we've now learned that the largest abortion provider in this country, Planned Parenthood, is not only destroying the lives of little unborn children, but selling their body parts for profit. And I might add that Planned Parenthood aborts more babies each year in this country than the population of the city of Cincinnati that I represent. That's every single year, the population of a city, Cincinnati. We've got to stop this slaughter. I introduced a bill called the Born Alive Infant Protection Act, which was passed by the House and by the Senate and signed into law by President Bush back in 2002. It helped, but the legislation before us today, introduced by Congressman Trent Franks, improves that law and will protect more innocent babies. Please, for God's sake, let's pass it today and protect those among us who cannot protect themselves.
The gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Virginia reserves. The gentlelady from California is recognized.
Yes, I would like to reiterate This is a bill that has been introduced with virtually no process. This was introduced less than 48 hours ago with no hearings, no expert testimony. In fact, those on the other side of the aisle are citing as evidence videos that have been shown to be highly edited, that are misleading and fraudulently obtained. There were 47 edits in the video that is shown. And even though Planned Parenthood doctors said 10 times that such procedures were not done for profit, that was all edited out. This is legislation based on sound bites and anti-choice rhetoric and not on facts. And I continue to reserve my time.
From California reserves. The gentleman from Virginia is recognized.
Madam Speaker, at this time, it's my pleasure to yield 1 minute to the gentleman from Kansas, Mr. Huelskamp.
The gentleman from Kansas is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Earlier this year, many of my colleagues and I stood on this floor condemning abortionist Kermit Gosnell for his barbaric murder of babies born alive during attempted abortions. Instead of providing compassionate care for these precious little babies, Gosnell muffled their cries by snipping the back of their necks with scissors. And we have people on the floor today defending that. No child should be treated with such violence, and no man or woman shall be free to perform such heinous acts of murder. As an adopted parent of 4 incredible children, I cannot help but think of the countless couples across America who would have given anything to care for these babies. This bill rightly affirms the humanity of all babies born alive, rightly affords them the full protection of the law, and punishes any abortionist who denies these infants their dignity and right to life. I yield back.
The gentleman reserves. He yields back the balance of his time. The gentleman from Virginia reserves, and the gentlelady from California is recognized.
I continue to reserve.
The gentlelady reserves. The gentleman from Virginia is recognized.
Madam Speaker, may I inquire how much time is remaining on each side?
The gentleman from Virginia has 12.5 minutes, as does the gentlewoman from California remaining. Gentleman from Virginia.
Madam Speaker, at this time, it's my pleasure to yield 1 minute to the gentleman from Indiana, Mr. Stutzman.
The gentleman from Indiana is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I thank the gentleman for yielding. Madam Speaker, what does it say about this Congress that today we're here on the House floor debating the killing and harvesting of aborted babies? How can there possibly be two sides to this? I don't understand. How can we not take a step back and look at this objectively? The gentlelady from California mentioned that these videos were highly edited. If you watch the videos, and I don't know if they have, but if you watch the videos, how can you say that the doctor who is pulling salad from a salad bowl and mentions that she can take the babies and crush the top and the bottom parts of the babies and harvest the body parts in between is highly edited? This information on these videos shows the barbaric activity. These bills before us today deal with this problem. Madam Speaker, I implore that this chamber take a step back and look at what is on these videos and the information that we have on these videos and realize that we must move forward on these two bills and stop this barbaric action. With that, I'll yield back.
The gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Virginia reserves. The gentlelady from California is recognized.
I continue to reserve.
And continues to reserve. The gentleman from Virginia is recognized.
Madam Speaker, at this time, it's my pleasure to yield 1 minute to the gentleman from Alabama, Mr. Palmer.
The gentleman from Alabama is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Madam Speaker. This is a fundamental American value. For our founders, life was the first right. They understood that there is an order to things that even nature teaches us. They understood and fully embraced that the first and foremost right is life, because without life there is no liberty. Without life there is no pursuit of happiness. Without life there is no discussion of a right to privacy or a right to choose, because without life there's nothing to choose. Life presupposes and precedes all other rights. Our founders understood this, but somewhere along the way to where we are now, we have gone from protecting the right that is the basis of all rights to deciding that unborn children and even children born alive can have their lives taken because their organs and tissues are more valuable than they are. It is inconceivable that a nation founded on the idea that life is the indispensable right, the indisputable right, could be at this place in our history when living children in their mother's womb, and even some who have been born alive, can be killed with a callousness and cold-bloodedness that none of our forefathers would have dreamed could exist in America. This decision whether to continue funding this barbaric practice is really about exposing the charade of the federal government supporting women's health care, when in fact it is really about subsidizing the killing and mutilation of babies with taxpayers' money.
Gentleman's time
This has to
expired.
stop. I yield.
The gentleman from Virginia reserves, and the gentlelady from California is recognized.
I would like to yield 3 minutes to an outstanding doctor from California, Dr. Ami Bera.
The gentleman from California is recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you. Madam Speaker, as a doctor, I find these bills troubling. You know, the oath I took was to do what is best for my patients. And one of these bills that is coming up today criminalizes the practice of medicine and questions doctors' judgment. It attempts to intimidate doctors from providing safe, evidence-based medicine, from doing our job, which is sit with our patients, answer their questions, and give them the best medical advice and let them make the decisions that affect their lives. This is unprecedented. It sets a precedent where those without any medical training can dictate medical practice and make choices for patients. This definitely oversteps any legal bounds. These are choices that should be made between doctors and patients. You know, congressional interference into how we practice is overreach. It is a dramatic overreach, and it is dangerous because it sets a dangerous legislative preference. What makes the healthcare delivery system in America so great is that it is accessible to folks, and we understand and protect the doctor-patient privilege. That is at the very foundation of the oath we take when we enter the profession of medicine. Now, the other bill that we're voting on today also dramatically restricts access. If you think about the number of women in America who get their care from Planned Parenthood, it is remarkable. The preventive health services that Planned Parenthood provides. You know, 1 in 5 women in this country have used a Planned Parenthood facility. It is a remarkably effective way for women to get their health care. And not just women, many men also use Planned Parenthood. Now, we should be having the exact opposite debate. We should be talking about how we can improve access to care, how we can make sure every American has access to all of their reproductive options. We should want to be talking about how we strengthen the doctor-patient relationship, how we take the government out of the exam room, how we leave choices, some of the most intimate choices, to the doctor and the patient. Again, my oath that I took when I entered the profession was to sit with my patients, answer their questions, but then empower them to make the choices that fit their life circumstances. That's what we should be fighting for. Those are our principles. That is who we are as Americans, those freedoms. Mr. Speaker, let's talk about how we improve access to care. Let's talk about how we strengthen the doctor-patient relationship. So this is about protecting people. Thank you, and I'll yield back.
His time has expired.
Madam Speaker, at this time, it's my pleasure to yield 1 minute to the Majority Leader, the member from California, Mr. McCarthy.
The gentleman from California is recognized for 1 minute.
I thank the gentleman for yielding. Madam Speaker, last week, the Judiciary Committee heard testimony from people who had survived abortions. They spoke as part of the House ongoing investigation into the practices depicted in the horrific videos that we've all seen. One of these people who spoke was Gianna Jennings. She told the committee that when her biological mother was 7.5 months pregnant, she went to Planned Parenthood, where they advised her mother to have an abortion. So that's what her mother did. But by a miracle, and despite the best efforts to end her life, Gianna was born alive. And because she was born before the abortionist had gotten into work, a nurse called an ambulance. Gianna was rushed to the hospital, and she lived, though she suffers from cerebral palsy because of the attempted abortion. You know, there are so many others who aren't as lucky as Gianna. The Born Alive Survivors Protection Act, that's what we're voting on today, would help save the lives of those children. It would impose criminal penalties on any medical professional who fails to give the same medical attention to children born after an abortion as they would to any other premature born baby. The simple fact is that when a baby is born alive, it doesn't matter how he or she was born. They are living human beings who deserve our care. But we're also here today, Madam Speaker, to take and talk in particular about Planned Parenthood, the organization that tried to take Gianna's life. I think for the purpose of this debate, it's very important to understand what this organization is. Many on the other side say that they're just devoted to women's health. The facts say something different. In the last year on record, they performed 327,653 abortions. That was in 1 year. Anyone who tells you that they're not in the abortion business doesn't know that number. Some defend them because they provide women health services, but they don't have a monopoly on women's health. There are tens of thousands of alternatives all across the country for women, from community health centers to pregnancy health centers to maternity homes, medical clinics, and more. Community health clinics actually outnumber Planned Parenthood clinics by the thousands, and they offer the same health services to women, if not more. So, if we know that this organization performs hundreds of thousands of abortions per year, and we know that women have access to other sources for care, the question is, should we force taxpayers to fund a business that spends its money aborting 372,653 children per year? Should we force taxpayers to fund an organization whose barbaric practices, as vividly shown in those videos, disregard and devalue the sanctity of the most innocent human lives? The gruesome videos that we have seen open the eyes of America as we struggle to understand how something so barbaric could happen in this country. We need to get all the facts. Are patients giving sufficient informed consent? Were the body parts of babies sold for profit? These are and more are the questions we need to answer. And while we find those answers, we have a moral responsibility to put a moratorium on the funding. There is no reason the American people should be forced to give their money to such an organization. And there is no reason, absolutely no reason, that we must choose between funding women's health and compelling taxpayers to support abortion. So as we approach this vote, I want every member to ask themselves a simple question. In the face of these videos, and with all the alternatives women have for health, why would you want to force your constituents to pay for something so evil? I yield back.
The gentleman from Virginia reserves. The gentlewoman from California is recognized.
I continue to reserve.
The gentlewoman from California reserves. The gentleman from Virginia is recognized.
Madam Speaker, at this time, it's my pleasure to yield 1 minute to the gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Rothfuss.
The gentleman from Pennsylvania is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And to reflect on what the gentleman from California was saying, recalling the testimony last week of survivors of abortion, their stories are remarkable. They show the deep appreciation that they have for their lives, and they are so grateful to have survived the attacks on their lives. So many others who did not survive will never have the chance to express such gratitude. We also know from ultrasound technology to see how unborn children grow and develop. Their humanity is abundantly clear. So should be their right to life. Our Declaration of Independence recognizes that the right to life is inalienable, given by our Creator. Indeed, President Kennedy, 54 years ago, pushed back against those who would undermine this fundamental precept of our nation when he recognized that, quote, the same revolutionary beliefs for which our forebears fought are still at issue around the globe. The belief that the rights of man come not from the generosity of the state, but from the hand of God. Giving survivors the same care, abortion survivors the same care and legal protection that any other child born at the same level of gestation would receive at birth is humane and it's essential. It also complies with the equal protection bedrock of our country. I thank the Speaker and I yield back.
The gentleman's time has expired. The gentlewoman from California is recognized.
I continue to reserve.
The gentlewoman reserves. The gentleman from Virginia is recognized.
Madam Speaker, at this time I yield 1 minute to the gentleman from Indiana, Mr. Messer, the chairman of the House Republican Policy Committee.
The gentleman from Indiana is recognized for 1 minute.
I thank the gentleman, Madam Speaker. Proverbs 31:8 calls us all to speak for those who can't speak for themselves. That's why I'm here today. I refuse to say nothing while Planned Parenthood executives are revealed, casually putting a price tag on human life and haggling over the dollar value of an aborted child's lungs, kidneys, and heart. These actions are unthinkable. And this legislation is actually a modest proposal that would place an immediate one-year moratorium on all federal funding of Planned Parenthood. It also funds women's health by taking $500 million that taxpayers send to Planned Parenthood every year and putting it instead in the hands of community organizations and health clinics that focus on saving lives, not ending them. Madam Speaker, no matter where you fall on the abortion debate, we can all agree that no unborn child should be dismembered and sold part by part. Where that's happening, let's stop it and join together to speak for those who can't speak for themselves. I yield back. Thank you.
The gentleman's time has expired. The gentlewoman from California is recognized.
I would like to yield 3 minutes to the gentleman from Florida, Congressmember Deutsch.
The gentleman from Florida is recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I thank my friend from California. I rise today to urge my colleagues to reject these bills and to get to work. The U.S. federal government is set to shut down in a matter of days. Shouldn't we be working together to stop a preventable crisis that will hurt our economy and tarnish our nation's image? It's our job. That's what we're here to do. Instead, we're debating a bill that's based on a false premise. I'm not talking about some debunked and discredited viral videos on the internet, nor am I talking about the lie that defunding Planned Parenthood will prevent federal dollars from funding abortion. As many of my colleagues have already pointed out, our laws have long prohibited federal dollars from being used to pay for abortion. What I'm talking about, Madam Speaker, what I'm talking about is the 28 men who wrote Speaker Boehner this summer demanding that we either defund Planned Parenthood or stop funding the federal government. 28 men who I guarantee you have never relied on just one health provider in their community to get a pap smear. 28 men who I guarantee you have never had to end a sentence about their educational goals or their financial or career aspirations with the phrase, "unless I get pregnant." 28 men who hatched this plan to deny basic health care to millions of women, I might add, that have been marginalized by this Congress. Their voices are not being heard today, nor are they being represented, not in these bills. Why? Because Speaker Boehner would rather let 28 men set the agenda for this entire House than seek out bipartisan support needed to fund education programs, health care, veterans programs, and services for our seniors. That's what we should be doing. Madam Speaker, these bills defund access to health care that has nothing, absolutely nothing to do with abortion, unless, Madam Speaker, I should say that we're talking about the more than 350,000 abortions that Planned Parenthood prevents every year by providing contraception and health care and education. I understand that my colleagues don't recognize the reproductive rights of women. I understand that's their view. I, Madam Speaker, recognize that women have those rights, and I urge my colleagues to reject these bills. I yield back.
The gentlewoman from California reserves. The gentleman from Virginia is recognized.
Madam Speaker, at this time, it's my pleasure to yield 1 minute to the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Babin.
The gentleman from Texas is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Madam Speaker, we must pass this bill today, the Born Alive Abortion Survivors Protection Act. We've seen the gruesome videos. They're not doctored. I dare say none of these folks that we're hearing from the other side of the aisle have watched them all. How can they make a recommendation or an appraisal? They show senior Planned Parenthood officials, former employees, and tissue procurement company discussing the sale of intact unborn baby parts. This is disgusting. It is inhumane. A society and culture that refuses to stand up and say this will not be tolerated is a society that is in grave danger. A child born alive during an abortion procedure is the most vulnerable living human being on earth, and they should be granted full legal protections. Medical practitioners who fail to provide necessary care for that baby must be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law, and this bill does just that. While it is so sad that an act of Congress is required to ensure such compassionate care, we must do all we can to provide for the safety of babies that are born alive as a result of failed abortion procedures. It is absolutely necessary that we end this inhumane practice today. Thank you, and I yield back.
The expired. The gentleman from Virginia reserves. The gentlewoman from California is recognized.
I still reserve my time.
The gentlewoman reserves. The gentleman from Virginia is recognized.
Madam Speaker, at this time, I'm pleased to yield 1 minute to the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Whitman.
The gentleman from Virginia is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise in support today of the Born Alive Abortion Survivors Protection Act. I'd like to thank the Chairman and Mr. Franks for their leadership on this issue. This issue is very personal to me. My mother chose life, and I was adopted as a newborn. When a baby is born alive after an abortion, healthcare professionals only have seconds to react. These children deserve the same level of commitment and care as a child facing any other medical emergency. This bill holds healthcare professionals accountable for making the health and well-being of a baby who survives an abortion their first priority, and for making every effort to provide the resources needed to keep that child alive. This bill should not divide us. It's about saving lives. We all talk about giving voice to the most vulnerable children in our communities and to the elderly with disabilities. Who is more vulnerable than a child whose life begins just as someone tries to end it? My mother gave me the gift of life, and I believe every child should receive that same gift. This is not about the Wizard of Oz strategy the other side wants to portray, and that don't pay any attention to the man behind the curtain. This is about the true sense of protecting life. I urge my colleagues to vote in favor of this bill.
The gentleman's time has expired. The gentlewoman from California is recognized.
I reserve my time.
Gentlewoman reserves.
Madam Speaker, may I inquire how much time is remaining on each side?
The gentleman from Virginia has 5½ minutes, and the gentlewoman from California has 7 minutes.
Madam Speaker, at this time, it's my pleasure to yield 1 minute to the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Brady.
The gentleman from Texas is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My wife and I are adoptive parents. We have a family only because two women in very difficult situations chose life. And so this issue of protecting the unborn is dear to me and my family, which is why whether you are pro-choice or strongly pro-life, as I am, I think Americans can agree we should never use taxpayer dollars to fund these abortions, and we should never use taxpayer dollars to reward organizations that harvest the unborn lives or tissues for profit or compensation. These are gruesome practices. It's time to defund any organization, Planned Parenthood or others, and begin to seek criminal penalties against those who profited from the sale of body parts of unborn children. This is the true human rights issue of our time, and those who defend this funding or these gruesome practices are on the wrong side of history. Speaker, I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Virginia reserves. The gentlewoman from California is recognized.
I continue to reserve my time.
The gentlewoman reserves.
Madam Speaker, at this time, I'm pleased to yield 1 minute to the gentleman from New Jersey, Mr. Smith.
I thank
the gentleman from New Jersey is recognized for 1 minute.
For yielding. And again, I want to thank Bob Goodlatte for doing such a wonderful job as chairman of the Judiciary Committee, a true human rights champion and a man who really understands these issues. And the hearing with Gianna Jessen and another abortion survivor, I think, exposes the fact that there are survivors. I remember years ago, there was a Philadelphia Inquirer piece called The Dreaded Complication. And it was all about all of the children who survive later-term abortions. And you know what the response of the abortion lobby was? We need a better means, a more effective and efficacious method to destroy those babies. And that was part of the genesis of partial birth abortion. If you drain and actually take out the brain tissue of a child before birth, it probably ensures there won't be a born alive. Let me also say, people on the other side were talking about the relationship between doctor and patient. What about the new patient, that new unborn child who is now a newly born child? Where is the relationship there to help that child? Abortion clinics are in the business of exterminating children through dismemberment, chemical poisoning. That's what they do. Getting this child to a hospital ensures that life-saving, not just a mindset that says we need to save these children, but the means to do so, including intensive care capabilities.
The gentleman's time has expired. The gentlewoman from California is recognized.
I reserve my time.
Gentlewoman reserves. The gentleman from Virginia is recognized.
Madam Speaker, at this time, it's my pleasure to yield 1 minute to the gentleman from Tennessee, Mr. Rowe.
The gentleman from Tennessee is recognized for 1 minute.
I thank the chairman for yielding. Madam Speaker, I rise today with a heavy heart. Having spent over 30 years as a practicing OBGYN physician delivering almost 5,000 babies and trying to save every life of every mother and every baby, I don't see why this is not something that brings us all together. Whether you're pro-life or pro-choice, if a baby survives an abortion, we should do everything we can to save that baby's life and to give it the same chance that everybody else has. I am getting emotional here because it is an emotional issue for me. I cannot imagine as a physician standing beside a baby that has delivered. No one in this room can. I don't believe there's another person in this room that's done what I have and not try to save that baby's life. I strongly support this bill. It should pass overwhelmingly and should be the law of the land. And with that, Madam Speaker, I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. The gentlewoman from California is recognized.
I continue to reserve my time.
The gentlewoman continues to reserve.
Madam Speaker, I just have one speaker remaining, and I believe we have the right to close.
The gentleman is correct. The gentlewoman from California continues to reserve.
Is the gentleman on the other side of the aisle saying that he's prepared to close?
We are prepared to close.
We have one speaker, and then we will be prepared to close.
The gentlewoman from California is recognized.
I would like to yield 2 minutes to our Congress member from Illinois, Congressmember Schakowsky.
The gentlewoman from Illinois is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you for yielding to me. You know, I just want to say that there is the implication in the testimony and in the speeches that are made here that the other side of the aisle is somehow more concerned about the life of a child born alive, that somehow Democrats just don't care about that. And I just want to tell you, I resent that so very, very much. We unanimously voted to protect that life. And if, in fact, a baby is born into this world and can survive and is alive, it is considered homicide to kill that baby. There are laws. There are laws that would protect the life of an infant, a real child that is born that can sustain life. And I just want to tell you that somehow making this division about people who really care about a living person that is born is just false. And I think I'm speaking for all people, for all Democrats, and clearly for all Republicans, that we need to make sure that we protect that life. But I believe that we have every law in place. What this bill does is go further and create fear among physicians, healers, people who are educated and committed to health and life, and put fear into them that if they don't provide for the exact procedures that you're talking about, that they could spend 5 years in jail for providing the health care services that a woman needs. And that's, I believe, part of this ongoing effort to say that we should end the full range of health services that are available to women. This is a further attack on women's health. We all agree on what the outcome should be, and let's not get into this ongoing fight against women's health. I yield back.
As the gentlewoman from California expressed her ability to close, I will recognize the gentlewoman from California to close and then recognize the gentleman from Virginia, since he has the right to close.
Is the other side of the aisle prepared to close? Okay.
The gentlewoman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Madam Speaker, this bill politicizes women's health and limits women's access to abortion. It interferes with a sacred doctor-patient relationship and substitutes a physician's best judgment with the judgment of a handful of politicians, and in fact, male politicians. I would note that not a single woman on the other side of the aisle has spoken on this bill. Let me note, it is already illegal to fail to provide care to an infant born alive. There was a bill passed 13 years ago, the Born Alive Infant Protection Act. And this bill was not intended to affect abortion practice or a woman's right to choose. And in fact, that is why Judiciary Committee Democrats voted to support it. But what this bill does is to vilify abortion providers. This bill is so broad and the penalty so severe, up to 5 years in prison, that one can only conclude that the real purpose of this bill is to intimidate abortion providers out of practice. This bill requires doctors and employees of hospitals and clinics that provide abortion services to report any violation of the bill's standard of care to state or federal law enforcement authorities. And any person, remember, we're talking doctors, cleaning crew, receptionists that fail to comply with these requirements is threatened with fines and up to 5 years in prison. That is why the 58,000 physicians of the American Congress of Obstetricians and Gynecologists oppose this bill and say that it represents gross interference in the practice of medicine, and they insert a politician in between a woman and her doctor. Let us not forget, politicians are not doctors. We should be concerned about doing our jobs and fully fund high-quality women's health care instead of trying to keep doctors from doing theirs. I strongly urge my colleagues to oppose this dangerous bill.
The gentlewoman yields back. The gentleman from Virginia is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. At this time, for purpose of closing our debate, I'm pleased to yield to the House Majority Whip, the gentleman from Louisiana, Mr. Scalise.
The gentleman from Louisiana is recognized for 2.5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I want to thank the gentleman from Virginia for yielding. And I want us to rise in strong support of the Abortion Survivors Protection Act by my friend, Born Alive Abortion Survivors Protection Act, by my friend and colleague Trent Franks. Madam Speaker, this bill is about standing up for the sanctity of life. And specifically, this bill deals with babies that are born alive. And whether it was the result of an abortion or a normal birth, all people in this country deserve that same protection. Madam Speaker, why should a baby that's born alive be denied that same right? Our founding fathers in the Declaration of Independence made it crystal clear. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Madam Speaker, the first unalienable right mentioned by our founders, and these were not rights given to us by our founders. They were given to us by our Creator, and that first right is life. And if a baby is born alive, they ought to have that protection. That's what this bill is about. It's about giving that protection that's enumerated in the Constitution and in the Declaration of Independence itself, to say they ought to have that protection in law, that if they're born alive, that they ought to have that same medical protection. So, Madam Speaker, when you saw the President come out yesterday and say that he would veto this bill, how extreme can somebody be to say they would not stand up for a baby that's born alive to have the same protection that the Declaration of Independence enumerates as an unalienable right? This should be a place where we can all come together, a place where we can all agree that we as a House can come together and stand up and give that protection in law to those babies that are born alive. I would hope that all of my colleagues would join in, that we could send this bill over to the Senate, they could have the same debate and agree to pass that on, and that ultimately the President would recognize that this is a bill that ought to become law. I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman's time has expired. All time for debate has expired. Pursuant to House Resolution 421, the previous question is ordered on the bill. The question is on engrossment and third reading of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. No. The ayes have it. Third reading.
A bill to amend Title 18 United States Code to prohibit a health care practitioner from failing to exercise a proper degree of care in the case of a child who survives an abortion or attempted abortion.
The question is on passage of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from California seek recognition?
I ask for a recorded vote.
The yeas and nays are requested. Those favoring a vote by the yeas and nays will rise. A sufficient number having risen, the yeas and nays are ordered. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, further proceedings on this question will be postponed. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Tennessee, Ms. Blackburn, seek recognition?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Pursuant to House Resolution 421, I call up H.R. 3134 and ask for its immediate consideration in the House.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 3134, a bill to provide for a moratorium on federal funding to Planned Parenthood Federation of America, Incorporated.
Pursuant to House Resolution 421, the amendment printed in House Report 114-262 is adopted, and the bill as amended is considered read. The bill shall be debatable for 1 hour, equally divided and controlled by the chair and ranking minority member of the Committee on Energy and Commerce or their designees. The gentlewoman from Tennessee, Mrs. Blackburn, and the gentlewoman from Florida, Ms. Castor, each will control 30 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentlewoman from Tennessee, Mrs. Blackburn.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks and to include extraneous material on H.R. 3134.
Without objection.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentlewoman's recognized.
I rise in strong support of H.R. 3134, the Defund Planned Parenthood Act of 2015. Madam Speaker, we all remember the images of Kermit Gosnell killing babies who were born alive after a botched abortion. We know that those are sickening, and we know that they have renewed the demand for accountability from the American people. That is why we come before you today with H.R. 3134, the Defund Planned Parenthood Act of 2015. New documentation of these heinous practices that we have seen in videos that have come out of Planned Parenthood abortion clinics of harvesting the body parts of babies as part of the abortion process have raised serious questions about the possible systematic and repeated violation of state and federal laws. H.R. 3134 provides a 1-year moratorium, a freezing on the federal funding to Planned Parenthood Federation of America and all of its affiliates, while investigations are ongoing regarding the practices of the abortion speaker. Madam Speaker, most people think that is common sense. If there is reason to investigate, then there is reason to withhold taxpayer dollars during that period of time. Those dollars would be given to other facilities that provide women's health services. The American taxpayer has been very clear for a long time that they do not want taxpayer money spent on abortion. 68% of Americans oppose. And what is so interesting to me is that we know that 71% of all millennials oppose this. And, you know, I would remind my colleagues, Madam Speaker, there's no difference between men and women on this. There is bipartisan opposition from men and women to this practice. Additionally, the majority of Americans are opposed to the sale of body parts of babies obtained after abortion. So the discussion today is not about videos or women's health access. We know there are other ways to get that access. It is about our most basic right. It is about the right to life. It is also about doing what the taxpayers sent us to D.C. to do. It is also about continuing the process to protect our most vulnerable citizens, innocent little babies. At this time, I will reserve my time.
The gentlewoman from Tennessee reserves. The gentlewoman from Florida is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I yield myself such time as I might consume.
The gentlewoman is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I rise in strong opposition to the Deny Women Health Care Act. Madam Speaker, congressional approval ratings are at an all-time low, and here is another example of why. Republicans in Congress have failed to fulfill their fundamental responsibility to our great nation again. Republicans have pushed America to the brink of another government shutdown, and we are a mere 5 legislative days away. Republicans in Congress have refused to sit down and negotiate a bipartisan appropriations plan, despite the urging of Democrats, business leaders, military service members, and citizens all across America. The bill brought to the floor today is an attempt by Republican leaders to distract the American public from their failure to do their job. Last spring, we urged Republicans in Congress to sit down and hammer out an appropriations plan. They refused. Instead, the Congress adjourned at the end of July, and nothing happened in August. And nothing has happened since the Congress has returned after Labor Day. Now, the Republican dysfunction in this House will have very serious consequences for our neighbors back home. A Republican shutdown would hurt thousands of disabled veterans, disadvantaged children, small businesses, working families, and taxpayers. The last time Republicans shut down the government for 16 days, the economy lost $24 billion and 120,000 private sector jobs. And here's what will happen. The Republican shutdown stalled veterans' disability claims, creating additional needless delays for our heroes seeking help. Hundreds of critically sick Americans were prevented from enrolling in the NIH clinical trials, with 98% of the National Science Foundation, nearly 3/4 of NIH, and 2/3 of CDC employees furloughed. Head Start grantees serving thousands of children were forced to close. American entrepreneurs and small businesses were cut off from millions of dollars in SBA loans, and small businesses with government contracts faced abrupt payment delays and cutbacks, and almost $4 billion in IRS refunds were delayed. The Republican Congress's continuing dysfunction and inability to govern are having real impacts on hardworking Americans. The American people are tired of their relentless failure to govern and the culture of crisis. Again and again, Republicans have chosen to put their radical special interest agenda ahead of the priorities of hardworking Americans. The American people deserve better, especially in this case, because the Deny Women Health Care Act is a cynical attack on the ability of women across America to receive the health services that they need at trusted Planned Parenthood clinics. And I know many are passionate about these personal issues. That's why the Republicans advanced this bill on this topic. They know it is sure to inflame passions. But to date, despite congressional inquiries into these false videotapes, there has been no wrongdoing uncovered whatsoever, no evidence to substantiate the allegations. What has emerged since the false videos were posted on YouTube is a coordinated, broad-based smear campaign based upon false, manufactured videos that are full of distortions and misinformation. The bill is one more assault in the long list of Republican assaults on women's health care over the last 2 decades. Because simply defunding Planned Parenthood would leave millions of American women without key preventative services, including birth control, family planning, life-saving cancer screenings, testing and treatment of infections, well-women exams, and advice on family planning. So at this time, I'll reserve the balance of my time.
The gentlewoman from Florida reserves. The gentlewoman from Tennessee, Ms. Blackburn, is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I was beginning to think that we were off on a different bill there for just a moment, yielding myself 15 seconds to respond. We are not on a bill about a government shutdown. We're on a bill that will make certain that women have access to health care. H.R. 3134, I will remind my colleagues of that. It does remove the funds from Planned Parenthood, and it does enable them to go to women's health clinics. At this time, I want to yield 3 minutes to the gentlelady from Tennessee, who is the author of this legislation and has been such an advocate for addressing women's health care needs. Ms. Black from Tennessee.
The gentlewoman from Tennessee, Ms. Black, is recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. As a nurse for more than 40 years and a believer in the God-given purpose of every human being, I am passionately pro-life. But you know what? You don't have to agree with me to support this bill. No matter our views on abortion or the party label beside our name, we should all have an interest in ensuring that laws are followed and that the taxpayer dollars are spent responsibly. If a law is broken, particularly by those receiving government money, that should be remedied. That's not a political statement. That quite literally is our job here in Congress. 2 months ago, a series of undercover videos were released implicating Planned Parenthood in the illegal trafficking of aborted baby tissue and organs. Now, some of my colleagues have tried to dismiss these videos, even without ever watching them. I get it. It's easier to try to discredit the source than to defend what's happening on these tapes. Well, Madam Speaker, I did watch these videos, and I saw full conversations of Planned Parenthood employees in their own words discussing potentially law-breaking activities. Congressional investigations are underway, but there are more than enough lingering questions to stop the flow of money, taxpayer dollars, to this abortion giant until our work is complete. For this reason, I have introduced the Defund Planned Parenthood Act of 2015. This legislation enacts a one-year moratorium on all federal money going to Planned Parenthood. It does not reduce women's health funding by a single dime. As a matter of fact, we actually increase women's health care funding by over $200 million. Instead, this legislation reallocates the funding to more than 13,500 facilities nationwide that provide true preventative care to those who need it the most, and they do not perform abortions. What's more, Planned Parenthood can get their money back. Read the bill. They can get their money back if they fully commit to what they talk about in doing women's health care and stop performing abortions for this year. If there exists even a possibility that Planned Parenthood violated our laws, as I believe they did, then pro-life and pro-choice members of Congress alike must act to reallocate the funds now so that we're not trying to chase down the taxpayer dollars that already went out the door later on. This is ensuring that our laws are followed, that Americans know that their money is being spent and that the conscience rights of taxpayers are respected. I urge a yes vote on 3134, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentlewoman from Tennessee reserves. The gentlewoman from Florida is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'll reiterate again, there's no evidence whatsoever of any wrongdoing, and I maintain that this is a distraction from the Republicans' fundamental failure to pass a budget 5 legislative days before a government shutdown. And I'm honored to recognize Mr. Pallone from New Jersey, the ranking member of the Energy and Commerce Committee.
For how much time? For 1 minute. The gentleman from New Jersey is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I listened to the previous Republican speaker, and the deception that she poses to this Congress is unbelievable, in my opinion. First of all, she talks about these videos, which we know have been misleading, edited, all kinds of changes have been made to them. The accuracy of them is totally unacceptable. They are not accurate. Then she says, well, just because they may be accurate, that we should pass this bill defunding Planned Parenthood. Well, when did this Congress get into the business of saying, well, before we've decided whether you've actually broken the law and before we have any evidence that you've done so, we're just going to shut you down? That is not the way we operate. That's not due process. That's not the American way. What this is all, and then she suggests that somehow this money is going to be given to other providers. I think she's probably talking about community health centers. Well, I will tell you from my own experience with community health centers, they don't have the ability to provide the women's health needs that are being proposed here that are actually provided by Planned Parenthood. That is not going to happen. Those women are going to be deprived of health care. So let's not continue with this deception about what's actually going on here. The Republicans just want to shut the government down if we don't defund Planned Parenthood. That's what they're all about.
The gentleman's time has expired. The gentlewoman from Tennessee is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. At this time, I yield 1 minute to Mr. Guthrie, a member of the Energy and Commerce Committee and Vice Chair of the Health Subcommittee.
The gentleman from Kentucky is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you. I thank the gentlelady for yielding. And Madam Speaker, I rise today in support of 3134. This bill would defund Planned Parenthood and its clinics for 1 full year. This summer, a series of disturbing videos shine light on a gruesome practice being done in clinics across the country. And no one's ever disputed that the employees of Planned Parenthood said what they said in the video. These videos have shocked and appalled countless Americans. Federal dollars should not be going to an agency that is involved in such horrific and disturbing practice. I have voted in the past to defund Planned Parenthood, and I will do so again today. Life is a precious gift, and I firmly believe we should do all we can to advance and support it. Today, I urge my colleagues to support this legislation to stop Planned Parenthood from continuing these practices, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Sir. From Tennessee reserves. The gentlewoman from Florida is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I yield 1 minute to Mr. Engel of New York.
The gentleman from New York is recognized for 1 minute.
Madam Speaker, I rise in opposition to this bill. We're here because some have again chosen to reignite the same tired battles of years past and bring our government to the brink of shutdown to restrict women's control over their own health and bodies. I should not be deciding what's best for a woman's health. She should, and her doctor should. That we are even having this debate based on contrived, unsubstantiated allegations about an organization that provides critical care to more than 2 million Americans is not only outrageous, it's downright irresponsible. More than half of Planned Parenthood centers are in rural or medically underserved areas where access to health care is already too limited. Yet my colleagues want to make it even harder for women and men there to access HIV and STI tests, breast cancer screenings, cervical cancer screenings, and other life-saving services. This attempt to demonize Planned Parenthood is disgraceful. And again, it is important to underscore that federal insurance coverage of abortion is already restricted. So to defund Planned Parenthood is to defund the preventative services that keep our constituents healthy. I urge a no vote. I yield back.
The gentleman from New York's time has expired. The gentlewoman from Tennessee is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm going to yield myself 10 seconds to respond. Again, refocusing us on the bill. We're talking about being certain that there is access to health care. Cancer screenings and prevention services from Planned Parenthood have been cut in half over the past 7 years. They do not perform mammograms. They perform over 300,000 abortions annually. At this time, I yield 1 minute to Vice Chairman of Veterans Affairs and a member of Energy and Commerce, Mr. Bilirakis of Florida.
The gentleman from Florida is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I rise today in support of the Defund Planned Parenthood Act, a bill I'm proud to co-sponsor. As the Energy and Commerce Committee continues its investigation into the troubling Planned Parenthood videos, it is crucial we do everything in our power to protect human life and hold organizations such as Planned Parenthood accountable. With this legislation, we have the opportunity to both save lives and respect the rights of the American people. Taxpayers should not be forced to financially support organizations whose behavior is at best unethical and possibly illegal. When it comes to defunding Planned Parenthood, the issue should not be partisan. This is about protecting the rights of taxpayers, but more importantly, protecting the basic right of human life. I will continue to give a voice to our most fragile Americans who cannot speak for themselves. I thank Representative Black for her efforts on this important piece of legislation. I urge my colleagues to support, and I yield back. Thank you.
The gentleman's time has expired. The gentlewoman from Florida is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I yield 2 minutes to Ms. DeGette of Colorado.
The gentlewoman from Colorado is recognized for 2 minutes.
Madam Speaker, Planned Parenthood provides basic health services to millions of Americans: pap smears, breast cancer screening, family planning, and birth control. In fact, there were over 4 million visits to Planned Parenthood clinics last year, and over 90% of this was basic women's health care and not abortions. So why are we talking about this today? Why are we talking about this legislation? Planned Parenthood does these services, and no federal funds are spent on abortion services that Planned Parenthood does provide. But yet the majority will take the radical step of denying women the basic health care they need. This radical agenda is wrong. It's wrong for American women, and it's wrong for us when the federal budget expires in just 13 days. I, too, have reviewed the videotapes. Our committee reviewed the videotapes, and as Ms. Castor said, and it bears repeating, no wrongdoing was shown. There's no criminal charges. There's no charges at all that are pending whatsoever against Planned Parenthood. Madam Speaker, yesterday in the Energy and Commerce Committee, my Republican colleagues, in their radical effort, went so far as to show a photo of a stillborn baby, implying that that baby was a fetus being used for fetal tissue development. What's worse, that photo was shown without the woman's consent. It had no relation to Planned Parenthood. It was used without the mother's consent. And what I want to know from the majority, is this the evidence that you're using to decide that you're going to deny funding for Planned Parenthood and all the well women visits they use? My colleagues ought to be ashamed of showing this, and my colleagues ought to be ashamed of putting this bill on the floor today. We are seeing shamelessness right here. On the floor today, my colleagues on the other side are trying to do everything they can to insert themselves between American women and their right to make their own health care decisions. It's wrong, and I urge a no vote on this legislation.
The gentlewoman's time has expired. The gentlewoman from Tennessee is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I will never be ashamed of standing up and defending life, ever. And I find it so interesting that our efforts to protect life are termed radical. That is an interesting turn of events, if I say so myself. At this time, I yield to a member of the Energy and Commerce Committee, Dr. Bouchon.
For how much time?
1 minute.
Gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you. With all due respect, a radical agenda is protecting an organization that dismembers body parts and sells them for profit. Madam Speaker, for the record, I'm probably the only member of this body to have operated on babies as young as 23 weeks gestation. In fact, the smallest baby I operated on weighed only 650 grams. As a physician, I spent my career caring for patients regardless of their situations, so I take access to health care very seriously. I find it troubling that the other side, most of whom have never spent a day caring for patients, continue to mislead the American people about the facts of Planned Parenthood. Here are a few. By its own statistics, Planned Parenthood only treats 2% of the nation's women for any reason. Planned Parenthood doesn't offer women some basic primary care, doesn't provide services like mammograms, cardiovascular blood tests, or bone mass measurements. Over the past 10 years, Planned Parenthood cut cancer screenings by half while increasing abortion services by 40%. Across the country, 1,300 federally qualified rural health centers can provide basic health services compared to only 700 Planned Parenthood facilities that really don't provide these services at all. Madam Speaker, taxpayers should not be forced to fund this organization when we have so many other alternatives. Thank you. I yield back.
The gentlewoman from Tennessee reserves. The gentlewoman from Florida is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I yield 1.5 minutes to Ms. Schakowsky of Illinois.
The gentlewoman from Illinois is recognized for 1.5 minutes.
The previous speaker said something completely false. Planned Parenthood does not sell fetal tissue
Suspend. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Tennessee rise?
Okay, we'll withdraw.
A complete falsehood was just stated. Planned Parenthood does not sell any body parts for profit. That is a fact. And so here we go again, Republicans threatening to shut down the government in order to deny women access to health care. When the Republicans took control of the House in 2011, the first thing they did was nearly shut down the government over funding for Planned Parenthood. And 4 years later, Republicans are once again seriously considering shutting down the government over the exact same thing. This time, they've manufactured a witch hunt based on heavily edited videos that were clearly intended to mislead the public and the Congress. They've wasted time and resources on futile investigations that have proved absolutely no evidence of wrongdoing on behalf of Planned Parenthood. In contrast, there is growing evidence the Center for Medical Progress broke several laws. I recently sent a letter to the Department of Justice and the California Attorney General asking them to investigate the practices of this organization. My letter raises concerns about fake identification that was used to gain access to Planned Parenthood facilities, fraudulent tax documents that were filed to create a fake company, a fake corporate entity, and violations of California's Invasion of Privacy Act. In response, the California Attorney General has initiated an investigation. There are also several legal actions pending against the Center for Medical Progress. Enough is enough. I urge my colleagues to oppose this harmful bill for women's health.
The gentlewoman's time has expired. The gentlewoman from Tennessee is recognized.
At this time, I yield 1 minute to a member of the Energy and Commerce Committee and chairman of the Republican Women's Policy Committee, Ms. Elmers.
The gentlewoman from North Carolina is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I thank the gentlelady from Tennessee for holding this important discussion today. And I'd like to thank Chairman Upton, Chairman Pitts, and the full committee and staff of Energy and Commerce for their hard work. Madam Speaker, I support H.R. 3134, and I propose an amendment to be included within that bill, which redirects $235 million to health centers across this country. Madam Speaker, I'm a nurse, and my husband is a general surgeon, and one of our favorite places in the world is our back porch in Dunn, North Carolina, where we sip Scuppernong wine and have a wonderful time, and we discuss good health care in this country. Let me tell you, and the American people, Planned Parenthood is not good health care. You can see this chart clearly shows that the 13,000 federally qualified health care centers in this country provide comprehensive health care for women. You can see this chart is just a mere example of 17 provided basic health care services for women to Planned Parenthood 6. Basically, what you have been told, what women in this country have been told, is a false choice. May I request 30 more seconds?
30 seconds.
Thank you. Thank you to the gentlelady. False choice for American women from Planned Parenthood. That false choice says that if one Planned Parenthood facility is defunded, thousands of women and children who are in need will go without health care. Let me tell you that false logic. That basically says in Dunn, North Carolina, if there are 18 grocery stores, one closes its doors, thousands of families, including my own, will starve. This is absolutely untrue, and we need to support everything we can in this country for good women's health care. This chart provides the actual truth, the truth. Good health care takes care of the whole woman, not just parts. With that, I yield back.
The gentlewoman's time has expired. The gentlewoman from Florida is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the Nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office has established that not all services currently provided by Planned Parenthood could be furnished by other health clinics and medical practitioners if Planned Parenthood were defunded. George Washington University professor confirmed this in a column this week. The reason why is that so many of the services provided relate to gynecological services and personal female health care needs. And at this time, I'm happy to yield a minute and a half to Mr. Kennedy of Massachusetts.
The gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized for 1.5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I want to thank my colleague for the recognition from my colleague from Florida. Madam Speaker, I think it is important that we do get our facts straight. This year, over 2 million babies will be born to women on Medicaid. That is nearly half of all of the births in this country. At the same time, more than half of Medicaid providers in our country are not accepting new patients. That leaves hundreds of thousands of expectant mothers without access to essential prenatal care and treatment. And that is where Planned Parenthood comes in. Beyond just prenatal care, they provide life-saving cancer screenings, STD tests, compassionate counseling to millions of women, men, and families who often have nowhere else to turn for their basic health needs. 80% of the patients that Planned Parenthood serves have incomes at or below 150% of the poverty line. Those patients are sitting inside waiting rooms at Planned Parenthood centers across the country at this very moment, facing some of the most emotional decisions and challenging tests of their entire lives. The practitioners and nurses who will treat them won't just attend to their immediate medical needs. They'll make sure the patient knows that he or she is not alone. If we pass this bill, we are turning our backs on those patients. We are telling low-income families in every corner of this country that we count their health and happiness less. I urge my colleagues to consider those patients and the impact of this legislation. And
The gentleman's time has expired. The gentlewoman from Tennessee is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Yielding myself 5 seconds to respond for 98.5% of the pregnant women who received a pregnancy-related service at Planned Parenthood, that service was an abortion. At this time, I yield 1 minute to a member of the Energy and Commerce Committee, Mr. Kramer.
The gentleman from North Dakota is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, North Dakotans affirm life every day through strong, stable family structures and a culture that values life and that, frankly, that values ending the circumstances that cause a woman to believe that her best option is an abortion. But we have over 70,000 square miles and thousands of women who need health care services, but we don't have a Planned Parenthood clinic because North Dakota women somehow don't meet their business model. There are, however, compassionate providers offering more comprehensive services across my state. This map shows the localities of 71 federally qualified health centers who provide quality care to underserved and low-income women in rural and urban communities throughout my state. The patients who come through the doors of these clinics, they are treated as valued community members, not as a fee-for-service, certainly not as a $45 specimen. This Congress and its relevant committees must complete a thorough investigation of the disturbing accusations evidenced in the Planned Parenthood videos that we've all seen before another taxpayer dollar goes to this controversial organization. These funds can be better used providing legitimate health services for women in places like North Dakota. I yield back.
The gentleman's time has expired. The gentlewoman from Florida is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I'm pleased to yield 1.5 minutes to Ms. Matsui of California.
The gentlewoman from California is recognized for 1.5 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, I rise in strong opposition, Madam Speaker, to this bill, which is really named the Defund Planned Parenthood Act, the official name, but we should call it the Depriving Women of Their Health Care Act. This bill is just the latest political attack on millions of American women. This bill is a step backward for our nation's health care system. Defunding Planned Parenthood would deprive American women and their families of access to preventive services like cancer screening, access to contraception, and prenatal counseling that helps women maintain healthy pregnancies. Sadly, I'm not surprised that my Republican colleagues continue this relentless attack on the autonomy of women. We've seen it countless times before. Congress telling this country that the judgment of politicians is superior to that of American women. What does surprise me, however, is that now Republicans are willing to shut down our government and put our economy at risk in order to deny women access to the health care provider of their choice. We can't allow members of Congress to substitute their judgment for women's right to make decisions about their own body. This bill does nothing more than take away health care options for low-income women because of a difference in beliefs over just 3% of the many vital services that Planned Parenthood provides. Congress needs to get back to work on the real issues facing American women and their families. Thank you, and I yield back.
The gentlewoman yields back. The gentlewoman from Tennessee is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. At this time, I yield 1 minute to the chairman of the Pro-Life Caucus, Mr. Smith.
The gentleman from New Jersey is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank my friend for yielding. Madam Speaker, undercover videos show and expose Planned Parenthood directors cheerfully talking about dismemberment and crushing babies to death, all while altering abortion methods in a way that preserves organs and body parts for sale. Watch the videos. One senior director talking about preserving liver says they use ultrasound guidance. Of course, and that's because that's where they'll know where to put the forceps, she says. Of course, forceps are used to literally rip the child to pieces in what is called a dismemberment abortion. One technician, Holly O'Donnell, talks about getting brain tissue and said her supervisor gave me the scissors and told me that I had to cut down the middle of the face. I can't even describe, she says, what that feels like. Some of our colleagues on the other side have said that there's no evidence. Well, watch the videos. There is ample evidence. But I would suggest, and I would ask Congresswoman Castro, join us on a letter asking the Attorney General of the United States to investigate this. Will you? I yield to the lady. Will you?
Madam Speaker, the repeated reference to these false videos is a true disservice to this Congress and the people all across America. So these false claims against Planned Parenthood have been widely discredited.
The gentleman's time has expired, and the gentlewoman would be talking on her own time.
I thought he yielded to me, Madam Speaker.
Asking you if you would join us in a letter asking for an investigation.
But the gentleman's time has expired. The gentlewoman from Florida is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Again, the repeated reference to these false videos do a real disservice to this Congress and people all across America. The false claims against Planned Parenthood have been widely discredited. The videos that so many have referenced are heavily edited. They've edited content out, and they've edited false images in. Politicians who are latching on to this smear campaign do so to further their personal agendas to the detriment of women's health care across America. What has happened here since these videos were released in July is a coordinated smear campaign against trusted Planned Parenthood clinics. And let me give you some direct evidence directly from my home state of Florida. In July, with absolutely no evidence of wrongdoing, Florida Republican Governor Rick Scott ordered investigations of Planned Parenthood clinics. It had all the trappings of a witch hunt. In August, after the Agency for Health Care Administration had determined and written a draft press release that said, however, there is no evidence of the mishandling of fetal remains at any of the 16 clinics we investigated across the state. That didn't fit Governor Scott's political narrative. So his office scrubbed the press release of that language. What I'm going to ask unanimous consent to submit to the record is a copy of the press release that was drafted by the Agency for Health Care Administration for Florida before Governor Scott's office scrubbed the language on the finding. And in fact, the press secretary for the agency said, I would have thought a line on no handling of fetal remains would be included, as that's what questions will be on. The agency secretary wrote back and she said she agreed. But reporters subsequently obtained the scrub press release. Apparently, these had to go to the governor's office to be purified and sanctified. What happened earlier this week is that the communications director for the Florida Agency for Healthcare Administration resigned. This is another example of the coordinated smear campaign based upon the false videos that have captured the attention. They're outrageous, but they're false, and they've been proven to be false. I'll reserve the balance of my time.
Without objection, the material referenced by the gentlewoman from Florida will be entered into the record. The gentlewoman from Tennessee is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Yielding myself 10 seconds to respond. We are hearing words such as deny, deprive, detriment to women's health care. We are increasing women's health care. Tennessee has 4 Planned Parenthood clinics and 26 federally qualified health clinics. Also, I would remind my colleagues, the investigation is ongoing. It is ongoing. It started yesterday at Energy and Commerce. We will continue through this to get to the bottom of it.
Time has expired.
At this time, I yield 1 minute to the chairman of the Financial Services Committee, Mr. Henserling of Texas.
The gentleman from Texas is recognized for 1 minute.
Madam Speaker, life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness. As a people, we have no more sacred values, and the right to life is foremost among these. Recently, shocking, appalling, horrific videos have come to light that show senior employees at Planned Parenthood casually discussing the harvesting and selling of organs of aborted children and ways to alter their procedures in order to, quote, obtain intact fetal cadavers, which they refer to as, quote, line items. And perhaps the most chilling video, we see one of these so-called intact fetal cadavers with its heart still beating. Madam Speaker, its heart was still beating. Madam Speaker, whether one considers himself pro-life or pro-choice, can we not agree that the harvesting and trafficking of baby organs violates the sanctity with which every child created in the image of God is entitled to? How can a fair, civilized, and compassionate society come to any other conclusion? Madam Speaker, today I rise to plead with my colleagues to speak up for the voiceless and the defenseless by voting to deny Planned Parenthood further taxpayer subsidies for the harvesting of baby body parts. I yield back.
The gentleman's time has expired. The gentlewoman from Florida is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I'm pleased to yield a minute and a half to Ms. Capps of California.
The gentlewoman from California is recognized for 1.5 minutes.
Thank my colleague for yielding. And Madam Speaker, I rise today in staunch opposition to this dangerous bill. Planned Parenthood provides exactly the types of interventions that prevent unintended pregnancies and the needs for abortion in the first place, like birth control options and medically accurate sexual health education. But if this bill becomes law, these important services Planned Parenthood brings to our communities will disappear, and the health of our communities will pay the price. We keep hearing that the work of Planned Parenthood would be done by other health care providers, mostly community health centers. And while that might sound like an easy shift, it doesn't work that way. Madam Speaker, I have a letter here from the California Primary Care Association. In it, they write, and I quote, eliminating Planned Parenthood from our state's comprehensive network of care would put untenable stress on remaining providers. We do not have the capacity for such an increase in care. This is the direct quote from the health centers that the majority expects to pick up the slack if Planned Parenthood is defunded. It would be untenable. Supporters of this bill are willfully putting their heads in the sand. They think it's no big deal to shut down hundreds of clinics offering essential services that are not available anywhere else. They think it's worth shutting down the government to achieve this goal. This political theater has to stop. We need to trust women and their health care providers to make their own medical decisions. It's not the government's business. I strongly urge a no vote on this dangerous bill. Ask unanimous consent to enter the letter from the California Primary Care Association into the record. I yield back.
Without objection, the gentlewoman's request for inserted material will be honored. The gentlewoman from Tennessee is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. At this time, I yield 1 minute to Mr. Boustany, who chairs the Human Resources Subcommittee at Ways and Means.
The gentleman from Louisiana is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. As a newly minted physician, fresh out of medical school, I took an oath to protect life. And as a cardiovascular surgeon, I worked day and night performing thousands of cardiovascular operations on premature infants all the way up to elderly. And now, in Congress, I intend to uphold that oath that I took to save life. The practices we have seen described recently, released in the undercover videos of top Planned Parenthood executives detailing the methods they employ to harvest tissue and organs during abortions performed at these clinics, is nothing short of atrocious. After the release of the first video in July, I joined my pro-life colleagues to call immediately for thorough investigations into this activity. And now these investigations are underway. The American people they need to know the truth. And while these investigations are ongoing, it's important that we take action to prevent taxpayer dollars from going toward this type of activity. I have long supported legislation to end funding for Planned Parenthood, and I'm proud to be an original co-sponsor of this bill. It's a very important bill. I urge my colleagues, defend the culture of life in this country, and let's vote in favor of this bill.
The gentleman's time has expired. The gentlewoman from Florida is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I'm pleased to yield a minute and a half to Ms. Spear of California.
Gentlewoman from California is recognized for 1.5 minutes.
I thank the Speaker, and I thank my good friend from Florida for yielding me time. Planned Parenthood provides 865,000 pap smears and breast exams a year. That is more than the entire population of states like Wyoming, South Dakota, North Dakota. I want to introduce you, members on the other side of the aisle, to Colleen from Albany, New York. 27 years old. I want you to look into her eyes, and I want you to tell me that you'd rather see her dead. Because Colleen went to Planned Parenthood because she was in between jobs and sought health care. She received a breast cancer exam at Planned Parenthood. She had stage 2 breast cancer, and she is alive today because it was identified at a Planned Parenthood clinic, and they operated, and she is healthy. She is not the only one. There are 86,000 men and women who seek services at Planned Parenthood every year for breast cancer or for pap smears, for cervical cancer, who are identified as having a positive test result. And as a result, they get care. 86,000. So what you're saying is it's okay for 86,000 people to die because that's how they were accessing their health care. I yield back.
The gentlewoman's time has expired. The gentlewoman from Tennessee is recognized.
Thank you. I yield myself 10 seconds to respond to some of the comments and reminding my colleagues this investigation that we're conducting is ongoing. Cancer screenings and prevention services have been cut in half at Planned Parenthood over the past 7 years. They do not perform mammograms. They outsource it. They perform over 300,000 abortions annually. That is their own numbers. 98.5% of the pregnant women who go there go for an abortion. At this time, I yield 1 minute to the chairman of the Health Subcommittee, Mr. Pitts.
The gentleman from Pennsylvania is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This morning we're debating actually 2 bills. One is the delay of funds to Planned Parenthood until the investigation's over and redistributing that money to the rural and federally qualified community health clinics, of which there are over 13,000, only 665 Planned Parenthood clinics, and they actually do women's health, like mammograms, as we've heard, and other issues, not just refer. So I would urge support for that. And the other one, which is sometimes infants are born alive after abortion. We had 2 witnesses last week before Judiciary Committee who were survivors. One of them said she was in contact with 203 other abortion survivors. And all we're doing is putting enforcement language, some penalties in there, because born alive is the law, but it's not enforced, and this would permit that to be enforced. And finally, with Pope Francis coming next week, he said this: the defense of the unborn life is closely linked to the defense of each and every other human right. It involves the conviction that a human being is always sacred and inviolable, in any situation, every stage of development. With that, I yield back.
The gentleman's time has expired. The gentlewoman from Florida is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. While the investigation may be ongoing, there have been no cases of born alive. The one case from some time ago, a doctor is in prison for that. This simply is not accurate. Now, what we know from ongoing investigations here currently is there has been no substantiated allegation against Planned Parenthood. But what we have seen is this Center for American Progress that posted these YouTube videos. They have made a number of misrepresentations and may have broken several federal and state laws, including violating federal tax laws, violating criminal laws, violating the Invasion of Privacy Act out of California, violating California's penal code by making false charitable solicitations. And now we've heard that the attorneys for the director, Mr. Dadalin, for CMP, his attorneys have advised a federal district court that he intends to invoke his Fifth Amendment in the investigation of him for his violation of federal and state laws. And at this time, I'm pleased to yield 1 minute to Ms. Wasserman Schultz of Florida.
The gentlewoman from Florida is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise today in strong opposition to the Defund Planned Parenthood Act of 2015. This bill is possibly the most dangerous bill for women's health to come to the House floor of this Congress. State and federal investigations of Planned Parenthood have produced no evidence of violations of laws or medical standards, and independent auditors confirm the videos referenced were heavily altered. What really happens in Planned Parenthood clinics every year is this. 2.7 million Americans receive critical health services, 78% of which live below the poverty level. Doctors deliver approximately 400,000 pap smear exams, and women receive nearly 500,000 breast exams, including screenings to 88,000 women whose cancer was detected early. This legislation threatens those services and the health of patients, including 7,000 women in my district annually who rely on Planned Parenthood for health care. As a woman, mother, and breast cancer survivor, I refuse to take that threat lying down. Republicans' own investigations turned up nothing, yet some of their members are willing to risk women's lives just to score political points. Enough is enough. I urge all members who truly value women's health to vote against this outrageous witch hunt. Thank you. I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentlewoman's time has expired. The gentlewoman from Tennessee is recognized.
I yield 1 minute to Mr. Lamborn.
The gentleman from Colorado is recognized for 1 minute.
I thank the gentlelady for yielding. Madam Speaker, I urge my colleagues to join me in supporting H.R. 3134, the Defund Planned Parenthood Act of 2015. Recent videos released by brave whistleblowers have definitively shown that it's well past time to defund Planned Parenthood. For far too long, and to the tune of $500 million a year, taxpayers have been forced to subsidize Planned Parenthood's abortion on demand. And thanks to these unsettling revelations, we now know that taxpayers have also been subsidizing the trafficking of aborted baby body parts. This is not health care, Madam Speaker. There are over 13,000 publicly supported health centers in our country that do provide excellent women's health care. In my home state of Colorado, there are 240 such health care alternatives versus 21 Planned Parenthood locations. This important legislation will not remove funds from women's health care, but shift it to responsible providers. Taxpayers won't have to fund Planned Parenthood's deplorable barbarism. I urge my colleagues to support this bill, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman's time has expired. The gentlewoman from Florida is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I'm pleased to yield 1 minute to Mr. Van Hollen of Maryland.
The gentleman from Maryland is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I thank my colleague. This legislation is the latest attempt to take essential health care services away from women. Our Republican colleagues know that none of the Planned Parenthood federal funds are used for abortion. They know there is no evidence that Planned Parenthood has violated any federal laws. They know that 90% of Planned Parenthood services go to essential cancer screenings, family planning counseling, pregnancy tests, contraceptive care, and other things. This bill will deny women those services, and when this bill fails in the Senate, our Republican colleagues are apparently prepared to shut down the government in order to shut down those women's health services. Mr. Speaker, our Republican colleagues are entitled to their views, but they should not harm our economy. They should not harm America's women. They should not shut down the government to try to impose their views on the country. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Tennessee is recognized.
Yielding myself 10 seconds to respond, Madam Speaker. They sure want that government shutdown, and I do want to remind them that we have over 13,000 community health centers in the country. Planned Parenthood has cut their cancer screening and prevention services in half in the past 7 years, and they do not perform mammograms, but they do over 300,000 abortions. At this time, I yield 1 minute to Dr. Rowe, who is a member of our Tennessee delegation.
The gentleman from Tennessee is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise today in support of H.R. 3134, the Defund Planned Parenthood Act of 2015. As an OBGYN physician who's delivered close to 5,000 babies, I was sickened and disturbed by the release of several videos showing Planned Parenthood executives casually discussing the dismemberment of babies to sell body parts. Madam Speaker, this bill isn't about whether you're pro-life or pro-choice, though I'm proud to say that I will always be a defender of the right to life. This is about the gruesome practices of an organization that receives over $500 million a year from the federal government. As legislators, we carry the responsibility and the privilege to protect those who do not have a voice and to ensure that tax dollars are supporting organizations that truly provide health care for women. I've seen the videos, and I can tell you that is not health care. I've spent my entire life caring for patients, and it's important to note that there are alternatives for women to receive care besides Planned Parenthood. I strongly support withholding tax dollars from Planned Parenthood until congressional investigators have had a chance to review the matter, and I'm proud to encourage my colleagues to support this important bill. And with that, I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman's time has expired. The gentlewoman from Florida is recognized.
Madam Speaker, may I please inquire about how much time is left on each side?
The gentlewoman from Florida has 8.5 minutes, and the gentlewoman from Tennessee has 11 1/4.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And before I yield a minute to Mr. Payne of New Jersey, again, the videos keep being referenced here on the floor. I want members to understand, and the American public to understand, that the first four short videos released on YouTube have 40 separate splices and edits that remove crucial context. They remove exculpatory statements like nobody should be selling tissue. That's not the goal here. And this is not a service they should be making money from. It's something they should be able to offer to their patients in a way that doesn't impact them. Or, we're not looking to make money from this. Our goal is to keep access available. In one of the videos, there are at least 16 substantial unexplained edits, including the removal of 9 instances where Planned Parenthood staff said there is no profit related to tissue donation. Doesn't it seem misleading and fundamentally dishonest to remove statements like that and then base a smear campaign and bring it to the floor of the United States Congress for policymaking? I think so. And that's why these videos have been denounced across the country by independent editorial writers. They've called them distorted and unfair, dishonest, grossly misleading, and politically irresponsible and swift boating. And at this time, I'm pleased to yield a minute to my friend Mr. Payne of New Jersey.
The gentleman from New Jersey is recognized for 1 minute.
I'd like to thank the gentlelady from Florida for allowing me this opportunity. Madam Speaker, I rise today in strong opposition to H.R. 3134, the Defund Planned Parenthood Act. There's nothing thoughtful about this legislation. This is a shameful and shocking sham. This has always been about Republicans wanting to restrict the right of women to make their own health decisions. And let me say, these doctored videos on YouTube, my children watch YouTube. And you can see whatever you want on YouTube. You can see a man punt a basketball through a basket from 500 feet. You can see whatever you want. So I'm not surprised that these doctored videos are on YouTube. Mammograms, are done in imaging centers, so no health center does an actual mammogram. So let's stop trying to mislead the American people with this sham. If you like YouTube so much and that's where you're going to get your information, I have another video you can watch right now on YouTube. It's called Dumb and Dumber.
The gentleman's time has expired. The gentlewoman from Tennessee is recognized.
Thank you so much, Madam Speaker. At this time, I am going to yield 1 minute to Mr. Walberg.
The gentleman from Michigan is recognized for 1 minute.
I thank the gentlelady. Madam Speaker, it's been said that none are so blind that they will not see. And so I rise today on behalf of the unborn babies who can't stand up for themselves. Many of my colleagues have already described the horrifying videos that shock the conscience and have sparked several congressional investigations. No matter what party you belong to, we should all agree that taxpayer dollars should not be used for harvesting baby parts for profit. But the debate today is about more than these barbaric practices. It's about the very character of our nation. Will we turn a blind eye to this callous disregard for human life? Is this the country we want to be? 2 weeks ago today, my newest granddaughter, Naomi Gale, was born after an emergency C-section from a doctor who understood the need for life for both the mother and the child. Holding her in her arms, in my arms, was a vivid reminder that all life is sacred and every child deserves dignity, respect, and a chance for a full life. America was founded on the values of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And Madam Speaker, it all begins with life. I yield back.
The gentleman's time has expired. The gentlewoman from Florida is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I yield 1 minute to Ms. Lee of California.
The gentlewoman from California is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I want to thank Representative Castor for yielding and for her tremendous leadership. I rise in strong opposition to H.R. 3134, which is nothing more than yet another ideological attack on women's health care. It would defund Planned Parenthood for a year, leaving millions of women across the country without access to critical health care services. Planned Parenthood centers often serve as a primary care health facility for women seeking birth control, cancer and STI screenings, and other critical preventive care. In 2013 alone, Planned Parenthood provided health care services to more than 800,000 Californians and provided more than 93,000 Pap tests and 97,000 breast exams. Denying access to these health care services, such as Planned Parenthood provides, it will harm those who most need these services the most, including low-income women and women of color. This bill is shameful, it's disrespectful, it's wrong. Politicians shouldn't be interfering anyway in a woman's personal health care decisions. It's past time Republicans stop their war on women and stop these ideological attacks and stop using women's health care to divert attention from a looming government shutdown because Republicans refuse to pass a budget. Vote no on this deceptive and dishonest bill.
Gentlewoman's time has expired. Gentlewoman from Tennessee is recognized.
Thank you so much, Madam Speaker. I'm yielding myself 20 seconds to respond to something. Our colleagues across the aisle have a colleague from New Jersey who previously spoke, and I want to reference a press release that was sent out August 15th from his office on community health centers. Community health centers attend to hard-to-reach populations and are a vital resource that have a significant impact in improving health in New Jersey. Talking about reaching hard-to-serve populations, this is what we're doing. Let's put the money where it meets the most needs.
Time has expired.
And at this time, I want to yield 1 minute to Mr. Duffy, who's the author of H.R. 3495, the Women's Public Health and Safety Act, and commend him for his commitment in those efforts. I yield to Mr. Duffy 1 minute.
Gentleman from Wisconsin is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It's a boy, or it's a girl. Any parent knows that phrase, and it's one of the most memorable moments that they will ever have in their lives. But recently we heard that same phrase, but it was said by an abortion provider at Planned Parenthood. And it was as that provider, we'll use that term loosely, was siphoning through the body parts of a little baby, taking hearts and lungs for sale, but noticed it's a boy. What a perversion. What a perversion of who we are as a people. And I think it calls into question this debate. This is not a debate about women's health. We're providing the same amount of money for women's health to great clinics that provide great care. It's about Planned Parenthood. Why is it about Planned Parenthood? If you watch this debate, you have to ask, how could anybody defend the practices at Planned Parenthood, harvesting body parts? How could anyone defend that? It's an easy answer. Look in political season. Millions of dollars are spent by Planned Parenthood to elect Democrats to the House of Representatives and to the Senate. This isn't about babies. This is about money. I yield back.
The gentleman's time has expired. The gentlewoman from Florida is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I'm pleased to yield 1 minute to Ms. Delbany of Washington.
The gentlewoman from Washington is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This feels like deja vu. Once again, the House is ignoring the challenges facing our nation in order to attack women's health. Already this year, the House has voted to restrict reproductive health care in private insurance, enact a sweeping 20-week abortion ban, and allow employers to discriminate against their workers for using birth control. Now, with just 5 legislative days before a shutdown, we're wasting our time on a bill the president has said he'll veto. It's past time for Congress to stop focusing on ideology and start focusing on the facts. And the fact is, defunding Planned Parenthood would have a devastating effect on women's access to health care. That care includes cancer screenings, immunizations, and birth control. And as my colleagues are well aware, current law already prevents federal funding for abortion services. It's shameful that the House is allowing the reckless actions of a few extremists to jeopardize the critical safety net provided by Planned Parenthood. We can't let that happen. I urge my colleagues to vote no, and I yield back.
The gentlewoman yields back. The gentlewoman from Tennessee is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I yield 1 minute to Mr. Gibbs.
The gentleman from Ohio is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you for yielding. We've seen in the videos that were released some of the horrific practices of harvesting the body parts of aborted children for profit. We've also known that Planned Parenthood provides abortion procedures, and the pro-life movement has for years worked very hard to ensure that no taxpayer dollars will be used to fund the procedure of abortion. Planned Parenthood is not about women's health care. We know this because not one clinic performs mammograms. But the despicable actions that were uncovered in these videos show the true nature of Planned Parenthood. It shows their complete disregard for life. It shows how careless they are with their responsibility to treat our most vulnerable and innocent with respect. We cannot give taxpayer dollars to an organization that profits from the sale of organs from aborted children. Planned Parenthood officials have been caught haggling over the price of body parts from aborted children, and they have been recorded on camera, fearing the consequences of their actions were revealed to the world. We have 2 House committees investigations who have an obligation to spend federal funding to Planned Parenthood while the investigations are being conducted. Now this is the time for all Americans to reflect on the fragile nature of life and how we treat the unborn. I want to thank Congressman Black for leading the efforts to defund Planned Parenthood, and I urge my colleagues to support this bill. I yield back.
The gentleman's time has expired. The gentlewoman from Florida is recognized. The gentlewoman from Florida reserves. The gentlewoman from Tennessee.
Madam Speaker, I ask for time remaining.
The gentlewoman from Florida has 4.5 minutes remaining, and the gentlewoman from Tennessee has 8 minutes remaining.
At this time, I yield 1 minute to Mr. Kelly.
The gentleman from Pennsylvania is recognized for 1 minute.
I thank the gentlelady. I stand before you today not as a Republican or not as a member of this House, but as a fellow human being. And I wonder, how did we get to this point? How do we somehow compromise in our mind what it is that we're talking about today? And I want you to disconnect from any organization or agency and concentrating on the act of what is taking place. This is not a blob of tissue. This is one of America's sons or daughters waiting to be born. They're taken from their mother's womb, the safety of their mother's womb, and they're taken out very carefully so that they can harvest certain body parts, hearts, lungs, heads. You can sit here and try to make it something about an agency and turn a blind eye to the act that's taking place in a country that will go to any lengths to protect life, in a people that believes in the sanctity of life from its very conception to its natural death, and somehow harvesting the parts from these little baby boys and girls has become a political issue? This is an issue human being to human being. This is an issue of conscience and conviction. Please do not make it a political battle. This is about our sons and daughters. This is about a horrific act that is repulsive and repugnant and has no place in America, and America's taxpayers refuse to pay for that type of an act.
The gentleman's time has expired.
Wake up!
The gentlewoman from Florida is recognized. The gentlewoman from Florida reserves. The gentlewoman from Tennessee is recognized.
And thank you, Madam Speaker, and I yield Mr. Davis 1 minute.
The gentleman from Illinois is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you to my colleague, Ms. Blackburn, and thank you to the many colleagues who stood here and stand with me to rise in support of ensuring that hard-earned taxpayer dollars do not go to private entities that are trafficking in fetal baby parts. We have to put a stop to this heinous practice. We have to ensure that this problem is investigated. We have to ensure that the federal government is not condoning these actions. I believe that we need to ensure that Planned Parenthood understands that the money that they have access to from the federal treasury, it's not mandatory that that money is given to that agency. We need to ensure that women's health is a priority, but let's put the tax dollars into the agencies and the community health centers that are providing access to women's health care every day throughout this great nation. We can do that. Let's stand together. Let's ban this heinous practice, and let's make sure we move forward. Thank you, and I yield back.
The gentleman's time has expired. The gentlewoman from Florida is recognized.
I yield 1 minute to Ms. Frankel of Florida.
The gentlewoman from Florida is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, Representative Castor. Madam Speaker, I rise in opposition to the Defund Planned Parenthood Act. Now, I want to say this as respectfully as possible, but this bill is dumb, it's foolish, and it's mean-spirited, with only one purpose, and that is to punish one of our country's premier health organizations because it provides women access to an array of services that we need to lead healthy lives. The bill is based upon lies and exaggerations. Now, if you want to have a truthful debate, then let's talk about the 400,000 pap smears, the 500,000 breast exams, the 4.5 million STD and HIV tests that Planned Parenthood does each year. Now that's saving lives, and that's the truth. I yield back.
The gentlewoman's time has expired. The gentlewoman from Tennessee is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. At this time, I yield Mr. Pittenger 1 minute.
Gentleman from North Carolina is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Many years ago, I was in London and with my family at the British Museum and watched a little movie about the development and growth of a baby inside a mother's womb. The video was all about life, tracking the baby's development week by week. Recently, we've all watched videos where Planned Parenthood executives candidly talked about death. How can anyone defend the sale of a little baby's body parts? Why should federal employers, taxpayers, support organizations that rob little ones of their right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness? Planned Parenthood has betrayed the rights and life of America's most defenseless. Today, I'm asking that you join me in supporting the Defund Planned Parenthood Act of 2015, which effectively halts federal funding of Planned Parenthood for 1 year or until they can certify that their affiliates and clinics are not and will not perform abortions. Thank you to Congresswoman Diane Black for your leadership on this issue. The character of our nation is at stake. We must restore the value and sanctity of every life and fight back against those unfathomable acts. Life is precious. Let's cherish each and every one. Thank you, and I yield back.
The gentleman's time has expired. The gentlewoman from Florida is recognized.
I reserve.
The gentlewoman from Florida reserves. The gentlewoman from Tennessee is recognized.
I yield to Mr. Rothfuss, 30 seconds.
The gentleman from Pennsylvania is recognized for 30 seconds.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. What we've learned about Planned Parenthood through these videos is appalling, barbaric, and indefensible. Here are some of the quotes. We've been very good at getting heart, lung, liver, so I'm not going to crush that part. Using a less crunchy technique to get more whole specimens. We're going to procure brain, so what you do is you go through the face. And when discussing the sale of body parts, a Planned Parenthood official asks, well, why don't you start by telling me what you're used to paying? Mr. Speaker, Madam Speaker, our nation is so much better than this. The cold indifference shown in these videos is the inevitable result for an organization that does hundreds of thousands of abortions every year. Federally funded clinics that serve women's health and do not perform abortions outnumber Planned Parenthood clinics by 20 to 1. Let's send the funds to those clinics. I urge my colleagues to support this legislation, and I yield back.
The gentleman's time has expired. Florida is recognized.
Please yield 1 minute to Mr. Farr of California.
The gentleman from California is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you very much for yielding. I don't think anybody on your side's read the bill. It doesn't do anything that you've talked about. It doesn't stop abortions, doesn't stop any of those other issues that are already illegal. It does one thing. It shuts down Planned Parenthood clinics. I represent the largest affiliate of Planned Parenthoods in the United States. And guess what? 22% of the patients in that are men. So you're going to deny access not only to women, but to men. You say, oh, we'll shift the money somewhere else. There is nowhere else. These are the only clinics around in many of the communities. So what you're doing is taking this angry white man's caucus on the Republican side that have been for years trying to use this as a political issue, using a bill that says you're going to do all these things and it only does one thing. It penalizes Planned Parenthood. Penalizing Planned Parenthood penalizes us all. It's about access to health care, and particularly access to health care for women. Stop beating up on women. Stop trying to make these a political issue. The reason we haven't been able to legislate against abortion is because you can't find a law that you could enforce it. This is really a moral issue and a medical issue that ought to be discussed with the women and their doctors, and the Congress members ought to stay out of this. We haven't been successful in solving these problems, and this just only hurts people, and particularly people in rural areas, because the majority of Planned Parenthood clinics are in rural areas. Stop being so mean. Solve problems, not create them.
The members are reminded to address their remarks to the chair and not to other members. The gentlewoman from Tennessee is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. 15 seconds to respond. I would encourage all members to read the bill. It's very short. It's about 3 pages. And what it will do is to freeze this funding for a year so we can do the investigation, and sends it to some of the 13,000 community health centers that are in the country. And we've even got a press release from one of their colleagues extolling the values of these community health centers. At this time, I yield 30 seconds to Mr. Allen.
The gentleman from Georgia is recognized for 30 seconds.
I thank the gentlewoman for yielding. The appalling videos that have been released revealing Planned Parenthood's horrific activities should spur deep concern in every American. In a recent hearing with Secretary Burwell, I asked her whether the Department of Health and Human Services would probe into these allegations, but she refused to commit to an investigation. We have a moral responsibility to act to investigate this organization's action and hold them accountable. I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. The gentlewoman from Florida is recognized.
Madam Speaker, can I inquire how much time is left and how many speakers are left on the majority side?
The gentlewoman from Florida has 2 1/2 minutes remaining. The gentlewoman from Tennessee has 3 3/4 minutes remaining. And the gentlewoman from Tennessee will have to answer how many speakers they have.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I have 2 speakers remaining, and then I will close.
The gentlewoman from Tennessee is recognized.
At this time, I yield 30 seconds to Mr. Heiss.
The gentleman is for 30 seconds.
Madam Speaker, I thank you for this opportunity to support this. The recent allegations and videos that have come forth have literally shocked the world by showcasing the morally bankrupt practices of Planned Parenthood. I'm honored to stand with my colleagues to try to prevent tax dollars from going to this organization that has now stooped to the practice of trafficking innocent baby parts. They say for the purpose of advancing medical research, but we all know that there is no excuse that can possibly be given to provide for the moral bankruptcy of Planned Parenthood. It's time to defund this while the investigation occurs. The blood and body parts of children should be looked as a sanctity entity rather than an industry. And with that, I yield back. Thank you.
The gentleman's time has expired. The gentlewoman from Florida is recognized.
I yield 1 minute to Ms. Pingree of Maine.
The gentlewoman from Maine is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you very much. I thank my friend for yielding and for her excellent remarks on the floor this morning. Madam Speaker, defunding Planned Parenthood would have a real profound negative impact on the 10,000 people in Maine who get health care from Planned Parenthood every year, many of whom have no other access to care. Planned Parenthood provides basic health care like cancer screenings, vaccinations, wellness exams, and STD testing. Basic care that will mean the difference between health and sickness, prosperity and poverty, or even life and death for women in my state. Let's be clear, who is really behind the attempts to defund Planned Parenthood? Radical anti-abortion groups who want to shut down Planned Parenthood and deny women access to safe and legal abortion. These are groups who want to deny women the right to make a private, personal medical decision. And in the process, they want to take away the access to birth control, family planning services, and even basic health care. And they have orchestrated a false, misleading smear campaign to try and accomplish their goal, a campaign we've heard a lot about today on the floor of the House of Representatives. I urge my colleagues to vote no and to stand up for women's right to make their own decisions about health care and protect their access to basic medical services. I yield back the balance of my
time has expired. The gentlewoman from Tennessee is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I yield 30 seconds to Mr. Farenthold.
The gentleman from Texas is recognized for 30 seconds.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. During the recent presidential debates, Carly Fiorina called and dared President Obama and Hillary Clinton to watch these appalling videos. I realize we only have a few minutes left before votes on this, but I want to dare members on the other side to watch these videos too. There are computers in the cloakroom where they can watch them, and if they want to send one taxpayer dime to Planned Parenthood after watching it, shame on them. There are much better places to send it, like these community health centers created under President Obama's bill. There are lots of places women can go for health care, not just Planned Parenthood. Go watch the videos. I yield back.
The gentleman's time has expired. The gentlewoman from Florida is recognized.
I'm pleased to yield 30 seconds to Mr. Blumenauer of Oregon.
The gentleman from Oregon is recognized for 30 seconds. Without objection.
It's bizarre to watch the manufactured controversies surrounding ambush-type, heavily edited filming used to discredit Planned Parenthood. These attacks do not reflect my experience and knowledge of the amazing, dedicated, civic-minded men and women, pillars of our community, who've built, supported, and led Planned Parenthood in my community. There's no question, because of their efforts, tens of thousands of abortions never occurred. Because of their efforts, 70,000 women last year received services. People who know their community's Planned Parenthood leadership understand that this heated rhetoric, outrageous claims, and attack against service to low-income women is not just false, it's wrong.
The gentleman's time has expired. The gentlewoman from Tennessee is recognized.
I reserve.
Gentlewoman reserves.
I reserve.
The gentlewoman from Florida has 1 minute remaining. 2 and 3. And the gentlewoman from Tennessee has 2 3/4 minutes remaining.
Okay, at this time, I'm going to yield 30 seconds to the gentleman from Ohio.
Thank you very much.
The gentleman's recognized for 30 seconds.
Thank you for yielding. I serve on the Board of Health in Cincinnati, Ohio, and I'm very familiar with FQHCs. And I might say that FQHCs provide services, expansive services, not only to women, but men and children as well. My wife and I are currently in the process of adoption. And it sickens me to see these parts of young children sitting there knowing that we could take them, love them, and nurture them into a wonderful life. I don't know how people look themselves in the mirror and think that this is okay, and I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. The gentlewoman from Florida is recognized.
Madam Speaker, the Republican Congress has fundamentally failed to fulfill its basic responsibility to work out an appropriations plan that will keep this government open. This bill to inflame the passions, that is based on false videos, distorted clips, that was part of a coordinated smear campaign all across the country, is being used as a foundation to close the government. I hope it doesn't happen. But it appears that the dysfunction in the Republican Congress is going to lead us down that path at the expense of women's health care, their basic fundamental services all across this country. Last spring, we asked the Republicans in Congress, sit down, hammer out an appropriations plan. They refused. They adjourned at the end of July. Nothing happened in August. Nothing has happened here in September except for these inflammatory bills based upon false YouTube videos. This Republican Congress's continuing dysfunction and inability to govern are having real effects on hardworking Americans. This Deny Women Health Care Act is a cynical attack on the ability of women to receive the health services they need. I urge a no vote, and I urge my Republican colleagues to keep the government open for hardworking Americans.
The gentlewoman's time has expired. The gentlewoman from Tennessee is recognized. The gentlewoman has 2 1/4 minutes remaining.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I'm going to yield 30 seconds to the gentleman from Texas.
The gentleman from Texas is recognized for 30 seconds.
Madam Speaker, where have we gone? Where is the moral compass of the United States? Do we want to continue the issue of taking body parts of babies and selling them on the open market and protecting that enterprise? Or do we want to back up and say, if that's occurring, we're not funding it? And all this legislation does is say, wait a minute, if that's occurring in America, we are not going to tolerate it. Until we find out, no more money, and it should go to other agencies that don't harvest the body parts of babies. I yield back.
Has expired. The gentlewoman from Tennessee is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And at this time, I am going to close and kind of draw to an end this debate. I do want to remind all my colleagues, we're not discussing government shutdown. What we are talking about is a bill that would withhold funds from Planned Parenthood for a period of a year while we have an investigation. Now, I know they've called this a smear campaign. We are investigating the operations of Planned Parenthood. Why are we doing this? Planned Parenthood is big abortion in this country, 300,000 abortions a year, as opposed to 1,800 adoption services. 98.5% of all women who go there for a prenatal service, it is an abortion. Think about that, 98.5%. There is reason to review how they use taxpayer funding, and we are justified in withholding taxpayer funds until we finish that. Now, our colleagues have chosen to say that we are radical, dumb, shameful, disrespectful, foolish extremists, deniers, deprivers, mean-spirited, and beating up on women. Think about that. All because we stand for life, for liberty. We stand for life rights, a first right. And these are the names. These are the names that you attach to people who defend those rights. You know, Saturday, I went to a baby shower. An excited grandmother said, "Meet my granddaughter." It was an ultrasound, a 3D ultrasound. Her name is Jessica. That is a baby with a life, and Planned Parenthood is aborting 300,000 of those lives each year. It is time for taxpayer money to be withheld. I support the bill. I yield back the balance of our time.
The gentlewoman's time has expired. All time for debate is expired. Pursuant to House Resolution 421, the previous question is ordered on the bill as amended. The question is on engrossment and third reading of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. Third reading.
A bill to provide for a moratorium on federal funding to Planned Parenthood Federation of America, Incorporated.
Purpose does the gentlewoman from Connecticut seek recognition? Sorry.
Ask.
The gentlewoman opposed to the bill?
I am in its current form.
The gentlewoman qualifies. The clerk will report the motion.
Ms. Esty of Connecticut moves to recommit the bill, H.R. 3134, to the Committee on Energy and Commerce with instructions to report the same back to the House forthwith with the following amendment.
I reserve the right to object.
Does the gentlewoman reserve a point of order?
Yes, ma'am, I reserve a point of order.
The clerk will continue to read.
At the end of the bill, add the following. Section 6, no impact on funding for organizations providing women's health services. Notwithstanding Section 3, nothing in this act shall impact the amount of funding available for any organization that provides women's health services, such as preventive care and cancer screenings, in appropriations legislation for fiscal year 2016, including any continuing resolution.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentlewoman from Connecticut is recognized for 5 minutes in support of her motion.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This is the final amendment to the bill, which will not stop the bill or send it back to committee. If adopted, this bill will immediately proceed to final passage as amended. I rise today as a mother, as a woman, and as a representative to offer this straightforward amendment to protect women's access to vital health care. Contrary to what many Americans have been led to believe, the bill before us today is not about abortion. This bill would, however, restrict women's access to health care all across the country by entirely eliminating all federal funding for Planned Parenthood. Let's be very clear. No federal tax dollars go towards abortion, and none have since 1976. That is not what this bill is about. We all know a woman who has been diagnosed with cancer, cervical cancer, breast cancer, ovarian cancer. It may be your mother, your neighbor, your wife, who sought preventive care or cancer screening from a doctor of her choice. And yes, we all know a woman who has received quality medical care at Planned Parenthood. In fact, 1 in 5 American women has sought medical care from Planned Parenthood. It may be your daughter. It may be your boss. It may be your colleague. My amendment will ensure that any qualified organization that provides women's health services can receive funding. It's simple and it's fair. We need more access to quality health care, not less. We need to stop trying to restrict access to life-saving cancer screenings, birth control, and well-woman exams. We need to stop fighting 40-year-old battles on women's rights. Defunding Planned Parenthood would have a devastating impact on women, especially low-income women, women in rural communities, and women of color. And it's not only women who receive health care at Planned Parenthood. Men receive health care at Planned Parenthood, too. Here are some facts about Planned Parenthood's critical role in providing health services to Americans every year. Planned Parenthood provides family planning, counseling, and contraceptive care to 2.1 million Americans, more than 1.1 million pregnancy tests, nearly 400,000 pap smear tests, nearly 500,000 life-saving breast exams. And let's remember that in many areas, Planned Parenthood is the only source of family planning services. That's why in 1976, as a college freshman, I volunteered for Planned Parenthood, because I had seen the impact on young women in my rural high school who had no access to family planning services. Too many got pregnant, dropped out of school, and never pursued their dreams. Today, with only 5 legislative days left, we should be focusing on avoiding a reckless and unnecessary government shutdown. Do you remember the last government shutdown? The one that cost us $24 billion. No wonder some don't think America is great right now. Dysfunction in this Congress is undermining the American people's faith in democracy. But we in Congress have the power to act. We have the opportunity and we have the duty to set aside ideological battles, instead to take up the urgent business of the American people. We should authorize the Export-Import Bank and pass a long-term, well-funded highway trust fund bill, investing in America's infrastructure to ensure that America will continue to be great throughout the 21st century. I urge my colleagues to support my amendment to ensure that American women have access to vital health care, no matter where they live and no matter how much they earn. Thank you, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentlewoman yields back. The gentlewoman from Tennessee is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I withdraw my point of order, and I claim the time in opposition to their motion.
Gentlewoman's recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. We all know that Planned Parenthood receives hundreds of millions of taxpayer dollars, and for them to get that money while they are under investigation for profiting off the sale of body parts, baby body parts, is just absolutely abhorrent. What this bill does is to put a one-year moratorium while we conduct the investigation. Let's be real clear about that. A one-year moratorium while we do our due diligence. That's what you call smart business. Doing your due diligence, being a steward of the taxpayers' money. Now, I have found it so interesting that they continue to say this will cut access to women's health care. No, it will not. Do you know Planned Parenthood sees less than 2% of all American women in a given year? There is an amendment on this legislation by Mrs. Elmers. It redirects $235 million to the FQHCs, the federally qualified health centers. It will increase access because we have more of those centers in more underserved areas, and they are required to provide services which include diagnostic lab and radiological services. Planned Parenthood has cut those screenings and cancer screenings and those services in half over the last few years, while they have increased their abortions to 300,000 a year. We are right in restricting these funds to Planned Parenthood while we conduct this investigation. We are right to be a steward of the taxpayer money. And at this time, Madam Speaker, I am going to yield back my time and urge a no on the recommit and a yes on passage of H.R. 3134.
The gentlewoman yields back. Without objection, the previous question is ordered on the motion to recommit. The question is on the motion. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. The noes have it. The motion is not agreed to.
Madam Speaker?
For what purposes, gentlewoman from Connecticut seek recognition?
I ask for a recorded vote.
Does the gentlewoman request the yeas and nays?
Yeas and nays, yes.
The yeas and nays are requested. Those favoring a vote by the yeas and nays will rise. A sufficient number having risen, the yeas and nays are ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. Pursuant to Clause 8 and Clause 9 of Rule 20, this 15-minute vote on the motion to recommit will be followed by 5-minute votes on passage of the bill, if ordered, and passage of H.R. 3504. This is a 15-minute vote.
The U.S. House has been debating two abortion-related bills today, one that would defund Planned Parenthood for 1 year unless abortion services stop while the House investigation of Planned Parenthood continues. The other bill that was debated earlier adds legal protections to infants born alive during abortion procedures. So two bills ahead. Now, though, a motion to recommit the defunding of Planned Parenthood bill. This is the last chance for the minority to change the bill before a vote on final passage. In a few moments, we'll get your thoughts on the bill, on the two measures before the House today, specifically on whether or not you think Congress should defund Planned Parenthood. The numbers are on your screen, 202-748-8920 if you're a Democrat. If you're a Republican, that number is 202-748-8921. Independents and all others, 202-748-8922. As always, you can join the conversation on our Facebook page or tweet us at C-SPAN. Before we go to your calls in just a few moments, we learn more about the two abortion-related bills. We talked yesterday to a Capitol Hill reporter.
As the House debates two abortion bills, joining us is Melanie Zanona, who covers healthcare policy for CQ Roll Call. Let's talk about the first, defunding Planned Parenthood. What's behind this?
So this bill from Diane Black would defund Planned Parenthood for 1 year while Congress investigates the group, which was prompted by a string of undercover videos released by the Center for Medical Progress, which claimed to show that the group was profiting from the sale of aborted fetal tissue. Now, Democrats and officials for the organization say that they have been abiding by the law and only receive compensation for costs such as transportation and storage, which is legal under current law.
The bill talks about defunding Planned Parenthood. Specifically, though, what would it do?
Specifically, it would freeze all federal funding, including mandatory streams like Medicaid dollars. It would freeze that funding for 1 year from the group while Congress continues to investigate. And 3 House committees are currently investigating the group for its practices regarding fetal tissue donation.
On the issue of dollars, federal dollars, the annual fiscal year coming to a close, and the issue of Planned Parenthood is playing into that as well. The headline in CQ saying no CR in sight as debate begins on Planned Parenthood in the House. That continuing resolution, how might this fit into those discussions on the new fiscal year budget, and what are House leaders saying on how they're going to get through?
Well, House leaders haven't quite decided what the plan of action is going to be. There's a growing group of conservatives who have expressed that they would not vote for any spending measure, including a CR that contains funding for Planned Parenthood. So the thinking is that if they can provide some standalone votes defunding Planned Parenthood and other anti-abortion priorities, that they might be able to quell some of that outrage and provide cover for those who don't want to necessarily link the issue to a CR and risk a government shutdown.
So the one bill dealing with Planned Parenthood, you're writing about the other bill, a bill sponsored by Trent Franks, and the headline says, Born Alive, set for debate under closed House rule. What does this bill do?
That's the other bill that's going to be debated as part of their strategy. And that bill would grant greater protections for infants who are born alive during a failed or attempted abortion. And it would require health care providers to immediately transport any infant born alive to a hospital, administer the same degree of care, and they would be subject to criminal fines and penalties if they do not follow those restrictions.
Well, before even the rule debate gets underway, the White House wasting no time in coming out in opposition with their statement of administration policy on both bills. What are they opposed to? What don't they like about these bills?
Well, the White House has said that while both bills do something different, they would both limit access to women's health care. So they have issued a veto threat, which is not surprising at all. And meanwhile, the bills both face an uphill battle in the Senate anyway.
Speaking of the Senate, the issue of abortion, also coming up there. Here's John Cornyn's tweet. The Senate will be voting soon on the Pain-Capable Unborn Child Protection Act, and the House will pass 2 important pro-life bills this week. What would the Senate bill do? And this sounds a bit like something passed in the House earlier this year.
That's right. The 20-week abortion ban was passed in the House earlier the year, also by Trent Franks. And McConnell announced earlier today that they are going to do a procedural vote on the bill as early as Tuesday morning. And that basically would ban all abortions nationwide past 20 weeks of pregnancy, which has been a long-time goal of anti-abortion advocates to get this vote in the Senate, where it has never been voted on before.
And covering the congressional debate on abortion, Melanie Zanona with CQ Roll Call. Read more at CQ.com. Follow her on Twitter at @MZanona. Thanks.
And right now in the House, a procedural vote on the defunding Planned Parenthood bill. We expect a vote on final passage of that bill next, and then a vote on final passage of the other abortion-related bill that's been on the floor debated today in the U.S. House. Now, though, we're going to take your calls, get your thoughts on the abortion bills on the House floor today. We'll start off with Albert, who joins us from Hendersonville, Tennessee, on the line for Independence. Go ahead.
Yes, I'd just like to know if public money for abortion is illegal and selling baby parts is illegal. Can anybody tell me if the Justice Department is looking into anything here?
We'll leave that there and check into that. We don't have any information on Justice Department activity on that, but we'll continue to look at that angle. Nancy, you're up next from Massachusetts, line for Democrats. Go ahead.
Hi. I've been listening all morning to the pros and cons of this bill, and right now I'm very unsure about just how true it is that they are selling body parts. I have understood that much of those films that were shown have been kind of fizzy and fizzled, so that people don't really know what is happening with them. Now, if they are helping women with health issues such as mammograms and other health issues, I think that this bill should not pass. If in fact they are selling body parts for real, then I think that it should pass. So I'm on the fence about it. I really and truly are, and I really don't know what to believe because I'm hearing pros and cons. Can you give me some information regarding that?
Well, thanks for your call, Nancy. One of the arguments that the Republicans have been making is they want to defund Planned Parenthood while they engage in this year-long investigation over these videos that were making news recently. Cynthia, you're next. Spring Hill, Florida, on the line for Republicans.
Yes, I'm totally against using money from public funds to fund Planned Parenthood. I'm against abortion to begin with because, for one thing, when I had 3 children and a nurse had tried to talk me into having an abortion for my 3rd one because I just couldn't, they said, financially afford to have another one. Well, God provided the way. My husband worked hard, and I believe a woman has other choices besides going that route, and especially with public funds paying for it. I'm totally against it anyway, but as I said, and for allowing me to voice my opinion.
You bet. Thanks for calling. William in Kansas City, Missouri. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you for letting me talk on the subject. I do not believe, very strongly, I do not believe the government has any role at all in killing babies or in any way harming their own citizens or future citizens. And I think the abortion operations should be shut down altogether. And I don't think any government money ought to be involved in anything like that. Thank you for letting me talk.
Thank you. The House now voting on a motion to recommit the defunding of Planned Parenthood bill. This is a last opportunity for the minority party, the Democrats, to make changes to that bill before a vote on final passage, which is expected next. More of your calls to California now on the Democrats line. Is it Farah?
Yes, Farah. My name
Farah.
is Farah.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Yes. My thing is, I wonder, can they redo the bill and extract from there the ability for them to be able to do abortions. Why can't they just redo the bill and then take it out and make it to where that they could still fund the health part of it and the community part of it to help the community and women, but just take the part out where they just can't do abortions. You know, fund the rest of it, but take out the part where they can't do abortions. Just don't fund that part.
Thanks for calling. Numbers on your screen to get your thoughts on the abortion bills in the House today. 202-748-8920 if you're a Democrat, GOP, 202-748-8921, and independents and all others, 202-748-8922. We have been watching Twitter for tweets. You can join the conversation online. You can tweet us at C-SPAN or go to our Facebook page. Checking a couple of tweets here. This one from Roger. He says, any representative that votes to fund Planned Parenthood knowing what it is now apparent lacks the morality required to be in Congress. Shlomo writes, I'm still waiting for one Democrat to offer a word of concern and or love toward the unborn. Christie tweets, you know what's against sanctity of life? Killing innocent children in war. Back to your calls while this vote continues. Jim in Freeburg, Illinois. Line for Independence. Go ahead, Jim.
Yes, sir. The representative from Pennsylvania, I don't recall his name, got up and talked on the motion a while back, and he said that there is all the evidence isn't in, there's no verification about what Planned Parenthood is doing with these body parts, that they're selling them or not, and we can't vote on something where we don't have all the facts. That was the key phrase he made. Well, if I recall, Democrats voted on Obamacare, and they didn't have any of the facts. So that shows the hypocritical mind of liberal Democrats in this country. They didn't have all the facts on Obamacare, but that didn't stop them from voting for it 100%.
George, you're up next in Traverse City, Michigan, on the Republican line. You with us, George?
Yes.
Go ahead.
I would like to see the funding cut off to Planned Parenthood.
And why?
Because of what they do and about the body parts that they're selling and all that they're doing. I just don't go along with it.
Okay, thank you for calling. Banning, California. It's Paloma joining us next.
Yeah, hi. I'm calling from Banning, California, and I stand with Elizabeth S.C. You know, I believe women should have their own opinion. You know, we all have our own lives, and I don't believe it should be shut down at all. You know, that would be it would feel like taking a little bit of freedom away from our own lives. You know, we all should have freedom to choose what we want to do, and, you know,
Thanks, Paloma, for calling. Kim, you're up next in Cottonwood, California. Another California caller on the line, Independence line.
Thank you for taking my call.
Sure.
I'm in support of Planned Parenthood. If it wasn't for sexual education materials provided to me by them as a young woman, I would have had a lot more children. And unfortunately, a few years into my career, I suffered a horrific on-the-job injury. And that led to me needing to lean on public assistance until my children turned the age of 18. And as a result of the services that I had received from Planned Parenthood, the state only had to help me with 2 children versus how many more children would I have had? I think that there is a lot more to what Planned Parenthood offers women than just abortion. And it's kind of frustrating to hear so many men calling and talking about these issues when they're not even issues that these men have to face. And I don't believe that we as a society are even sure that there is 1 cent of taxpayer dollar going towards abortions, because there is so much money that Planned Parenthood has to raise on their own that has nothing to do with taxpayer funding.
2 bills to be voted on in the House today related to abortion. The first final passage vote coming up next, we assume, on the defunding of Planned Parenthood. It would stop all federal Planned Parenthood funding for 1 year unless abortion services stop while the U.S. House investigation continues. And then we expect a final passage vote on the other abortion-related bill. It would add legal protections to infants born alive during abortion procedures. The White House has issued a veto threat on both of those measures. Back to your calls as this procedural vote in the House continues. Marie joins us from Hartsville, Tennessee on the Republican line.
Yes, my question is, the Republicans want to investigate Planned Parenthood for 1 year to find out what they're actually doing as far as the abortions. The Democrats seem to want to say those videos have been edited or tampered with. What proof do the Democrats have that those videos have been tampered with or edited? That's my question.
All right, thanks for calling. Vinces from Wichita, Kansas, Democratic caller. Go ahead.
Okay, good afternoon. My comment is, now they have been stating, and it's probably facts, that they don't even put money into the abortion. Anyway, I don't think the people are really listening. And the Republicans are real good about defunding anything that helps the people in the United States, and this is terrible. And I wish America would wake up, because this is going to go on and get even worse if they keep letting them go.
All right, to the independent line, Keisha in Birmingham, Alabama.
Hey, how you doing today?
Good, thanks.
Well, my thoughts on defunding Planned Parenthood, based upon what the Republicans said, that only 2% of low-income people come. So what are they doing if only 2% of people come to the clinics? What's the point of having them there? And then based off the videos, I'm not supporting that. If they're using babies' body parts to sell, like, what mind do they have? That's what I'm saying. I don't understand why would they do that. And secondly, they don't have my support. I don't even want to go to the clinics if that's what they're doing. And who decides whether, for as abortion goes, do the women have rights or do the unborn fetus have rights? Based off the Constitution, that everybody is equal, we the people. You know how that is. Who has the rights? Isn't that a life too?
Thanks for calling. Mentioned the baby parts issue in this Planned Parenthood debate. Back to the tweets that we've been watching come in during the debate and this vote in the U.S. House. R. Owl writing, 100 uses for baby parts. Why is there no outrage against the companies who buy? And this from Renee, just imagine if GOP cared about the babies that are killed by gun violence every day. Far outnumbers what they're fighting today. More calls as this procedural vote in the House continues. Your thoughts on the abortion bills being debated and voted on today. Glenn in Georgia on the line for Republicans. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you for my call. I've been closely following this issue down through the weeks, and I always try and look for a common sense approach to anything that comes up like this bill. And I understand all the Democrats have been saying about all of the good that the hundreds of thousands of men and women receive from Planned Parenthood. I'm in total agreement of that. what I can understand, and I think an earlier caller alluded to this, why can't we just take Planned Parenthood out of the abortion business? Defund the funds that are used for abortion by this outfit, and that way we're taking Planned Parenthood out of the abortion business, and by taking those funds away, we're taking the government out of the abortion business. I totally support all of the good. I really think these hundreds of thousands of people should be able to continue receiving these preventive health care measures.
Thanks for calling, Glenn. Joel, you're up next from Somerset, New Jersey, Democratic caller.
Yes, thanks for taking my call. Everybody's speaking about abortion. Anybody speak about the children that are born, who takes care of them? The other thing is about not having anything else, who takes care of them, I think is very important.
Okay, thank you for calling. And then your comment. Shane in Chatsworth, Georgia. Go ahead.
Okay, here's one thing. They need to read the Ten Commandments, okay? I'm sorry for getting upset here, but they shall not kill. That's a Ten Commandment. We shall not kill anyone. And another thing, they need to stop abortion, period. If the lady's going to spread her legs, if they're going to spread their legs and have a child, they need to take care of that child. Or if they can't take care of the child or don't want it, they need to adopt that child out and don't kill it, please. That's all I'm asking. They need to stop the abortion thing, period.
Thanks for calling. Tiffany in Tennessee, line for Democrats. Go ahead.
Hi, sorry, it's actually Texas.
Texas.
One of my main concerns is no, you're fine. One of my main concerns is the fallout that will happen from seizing any sort of funding for a year to do an investigation that's essentially based off of a smear campaign. There's a huge lack of fact-checking. The entire argument seems to be entirely opinion-based, and what really baffles me is the general population has seemed to completely forget the huge involvement in Roe versus Wade, which directly affected the 14th Amendment and women's rights in general. So what I'm wondering is, everyone who is opposed to Planned Parenthood receiving funding, what do you think that the consequences of completely defunding Planned Parenthood and the abortions in itself, what is the fallout going to be if we're so solely concentrated on a child born and not a child raised? We're so concerned about children being born, but no one seems to think about the consequences of how much more we as a society are going to have to supply these children with extra funds, extra care, and no one seems to be thinking about those consequences.
Thanks for calling, Tiffany. That'll be the last word as this vote is about to wrap up. A procedural vote, a motion to recommit, and we'll go back to the floor now.
Mr. McGovern. Green. Mr. McGovern votes aye. Mr. Grayson. Mr. Grayson votes aye. Mr. Schrader. Mr. Schrader votes aye. Mr. Young of Indiana. Mr. Young of Indiana votes no. Mr. Rush. Mr. Rush votes aye. Mr. Delaney. Mr. Delaney votes aye. Mrs. Lowy. Mrs. Lowy votes aye.
On this vote, the yeas are 183, the nays are 245. The motion is not adopted. The question is on passage of the bill. Those in favor, please say aye. Those opposed, please say no. The ayes have it. The bill is passed and without objection.
Speaker, I ask for a recorded...
The gentlelady from Florida seek recognition.
Madam Speaker, I ask for a recorded vote.
A recorded vote is requested. Those favoring a recorded vote will rise. A sufficient number having risen, a recorded vote is ordered. Members record their votes by electronic device. This will be a 5-minute vote.
And now a final passage vote on the bill that would defund Planned Parenthood for 1 year unless abortion services stop at the organization while a House investigation continues. This is, again, a 5-minute vote on final passage of that measure, and then we expect a vote on passage of another abortion-related bill that would add legal protections to infants born alive during abortion procedures. The White House has threatened vetoes of both of these bills. This should be it for recorded votes in the U.S. House today and this week. The House is out the first part of next week for district work period in Yom Kippur, and then the Pope speaks to a joint meeting of Congress next Thursday. Congress has until September 30th to pass a continuing resolution to keep the federal government funded and avert a shutdown. And that is ahead later next week in the House and Senate. We'll watch this vote continue in the U.S. House as our live House coverage continues on C-SPAN.
On this vote, the yeas are 248. And the nays are 177 with 1 answering present. The bill is passed. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table.
I'm the leading state sponsor of terrorism.